Telescopes tuned to watch 3I Atlas, that strange, green wanderer from another star, record a flash where no flash should be. For 6 seconds, the comet brightens by a factor of 8 before returning to calm, leaving the sensors stuttering. At first, astronomers call it a flare, perhaps an outgassing of volatile ice. But flares don't leave trails of radio distortion. This one does a filament of static that crawls through the spectrum like a bruise across sound. And then, days later, Mars flickers, not visibly, not dramatically, just a faint, measurable dip in its reflected sunlight, as if something had passed between it and the Sunday, something coordinated. Data from orbiters confirmed the anomaly. A beam of charged particles had struck the planet's atmosphere at nearly light speed, carving a scar of ionization 1,000 kilometers long. The direction of origin points precisely to 3I Atlas. Officially, space agencies describe it as an energetic ejection event. Unofficially, scientists whisper another word: intent. Because the burst carried symmetry, frequency modulation nested within chaos, the mathematical fingerprint of decision. If the cosmos were a language, this was punctuation, a deliberate comma in the dark. And yet, the world does not panic. Not yet. Humanity has seen comets misbehave before explode, fracture, perform physics like poetry. But this feels different. Not just because of the directionality or the rhythm of the pulses, but because of what happens next. The swarm behind the comet, those thousands of trailing fragments, begin to glow independently. One by one, they light up like neurons firing. The pattern spreads until it forms a vast, spiral lattice, visible in radio and X-ray wavelengths. The shape is not random. It mirrors the structure of the human brain. What could a comet possibly launch except memory? What could an alien mechanism possibly attack except silence? Tonight, you lie beneath that same sky, the stars flickering like cautious witnesses. You wonder whether an act of aggression can also be an act of awakening. You wonder if knowledge itself might strike first. Leave a comment telling me what time it is and where you're listening from, because the next sound we hear may not be thunder. It may be recognition. At first, it was just light, one anomalous burst against a quiet sky. A comet brightens, fades, and everyone moves on. Space, after all, is an untidy place. But this flare, this impossible 6-second bloom from 3I Atlas, did something no comet should ever do. It left a fingerprint. Across the spectrum, optical, radio, X-ray, a pulse etched itself into instruments on 3 continents, all synchronized to the same millisecond. When the data was layered together, it formed a waveform so precise it looked engineered. Flares decay exponentially. This one curved like a question mark. In Hawaii, the Pan-STARRS Observatory caught the first visual trace, a green flash that erupted and vanished before human eyes could even blink. But in Chile, at the Atacama Array, radio telescopes caught something stranger, the echo, a second pulse, weaker, delayed by 22 seconds, as if the light itself had rebounded off something invisible. When spectrographs ran comparisons, the reflected pulse contained a reversed signature, like a mirror image of the original burst. The cosmos had blinked back. For weeks, explanations circulated like myths in lab coats: ice outgassing, magnetic reconnection, solar wind interaction, but none accounted for the directional precision of the event. Every model that fit the brightness failed the symmetry test. Flares radiate randomly. This one struck with aim. Its beamline, when traced, passed cleanly through the orbital plane of Mars. What made it uncanny was the timing. 27 hours later, the Martian ionosphere lit up like a warning flare. The European Space Agency's orbiter recorded an auroral bloom over the northern hemisphere, a vertical scar glowing in ultraviolet. The angle of incidence matched the comet's trajectory. The odds of alignment by chance were 1 in 10 billion, yet official statements framed it as coincidence. Energetic particle ejection, they said. But their silence in the following days, the cancelled press conferences, the locked data portals, spoke in frequencies far more believable than words. Inside NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, a team led by Dr. Lydia Raman reprocessed the radio data. When slowed by a factor of 10 million, the waveform produced a repeating pattern, a harmonic ladder climbing in intervals of 3, 5, and 7, the same prime sequence found in the swarm's orbital ratios. The team called it the staircase. To most, it was a mathematical curiosity. To Lydia, it was choreography. "It's not random," she whispered. "It's rehearsal." Meanwhile, amateur astronomers noticed that the swarm trailing 3I Atlas had brightened disproportionately. The leading fragments glowed first, then those behind, as though passing a signal hand to hand through space. Some described it as a neural cascade, like a brain firing its first conscious thought. Across forums and message boards, humanity debated a question too delicate for press releases. Could a comet think? The Martian anomaly deepened the unease. Magnetometers aboard the Perseverance rover registered faint oscillations, low-frequency vibrations rolling across the surface. The tremors didn't come from the ground, but from above, resonating through the thin atmosphere. When converted to sound, they resembled a distant heartbeat, slow and deliberate. Scientists cross-referenced the frequency and found it identical to the one embedded in the comet's flare. The implication was simple and horrifying. Mars had answered. Governments reacted in the only way governments know, by classifying. All high-bandwidth transmissions from Mars were encrypted overnight. Civilian scientists received no explanation. The words "continuity of monitoring" appeared in a terse memo circulated through space agencies, followed by a single directive: do not anthropomorphize the data, as though language itself might invite panic. But outside official circles, the world already felt the tremor of significance. Artists painted the flare as an eye-opening in the void. Poets called it the comet's confession. Children watched news streams and asked their parents if Mars could get sick. Something collective stirred a shared awareness that maybe the silence of the cosmos had not been apathy, but patience. Weeks later, the red planet's magnetosphere stabilized, but not before one last anomaly, a geometric imprint in the dust near Elysium Planitia. High-altitude drones captured the pattern, a spiral nested within 7 concentric rings. The formation measured 80 kilometers across, too vast for accident, too orderly for weather. Spectral imaging showed faint radio emissions pulsing outward from its center, synchronized to the residual echo from 3I Atlas. The planet, it seemed, was resonating. Scientists proposed natural explanations: dust devils, shaped by magnetic eddies, echoes of seismic interference. But privately, they stopped calling it coincidence. The phrase whispered in hallways was directive patterning. Something had reached across space and struck a chord. When asked what she believed, Dr. Raman said quietly, "If it was an attack, it wasn't against matter. It was against equilibrium, and she might be right. Because not all weapons destroy. Some awaken. Tonight, as the world sleeps beneath indifferent stars, You feel the faint ache of recognition in your ribs, a resonance older than fear. Somewhere out there, a green comet hums its patient tune, and a red planet hums back. Between them, the void listens. And if listening is how wars begin, perhaps this one has already started. When the first full-resolution images arrived from Mars, no one believed them. The spiral etched into the Elysium dust was too large, too perfect. Its symmetry spanned beyond natural weathering. Its curvature obeyed geometry that required intention. Engineers checked for sensor distortion, digital corruption, algorithmic compression. The pattern persisted. "It's as if something played the surface like an instrument," whispered Dr. Lydia Rahman. A single, deliberate note. The spiral's concentric rings glowed faintly in infrared, retaining heat longer than the surrounding terrain, as though the soil itself had been rearranged at the atomic level. The Perseverance rover, still operational hundreds of kilometers away, recorded electromagnetic tremors propagating through the crust toward its location. Each wave arrived 12 minutes apart, identical in spacing to the comet's earlier radio pulse. When modeled three-dimensionally, the pulses formed a helical lattice, matching the geometry of 3I Atlas's swarm. Mars, it seemed, was echoing the comet's structure in slow motion. The phenomenon baffled geophysicists. Mars has no global magnetic field to guide such precision, no tectonic vitality to generate harmonic motion. Yet instruments confirmed the resonance down to 1/10 of a hertz. The planet was vibrating like a tuning fork struck by light years. In Geneva, the European Space Agency convened an emergency session. They compared data from all Mars orbiters, ESA, NASA, JAXA, private ventures, and found identical readings. Even the defunct MAVEN probe, dormant for years, had inexplicably reactivated long enough to transmit 2 kilobytes of data, a repeating string of primes 3, 5, 7, 11. The same ratios, the same calling card. Publicly, agencies referred to it as unexpected electromagnetic coupling. Privately, the phrase used was directed coherence. Something was enforcing order across chaos, sculpting a pattern out of planetary dust. The swarm's energy burst. That initial flare, mistaken for a solar reaction, had not been aimless. It had been calibration. For weeks, Mars glowed faintly at night, visible even to amateur astronomers, as a red sphere haloed in ghostly green. Photographs showed polar auroras shimmering in symmetrical bands. The planet, for the first time, looked awake. Dr. Raymond led the analysis team. Her office lights stayed on for 72 hours straight as she cross-referenced orbital telemetry with radio interference logs. What emerged was a timeline. The comet's flare at time 0, the Martian ionization 31 hours later, the spiral's emergence 2 days after that. Each stage followed exponential progression, amplitude increasing, interval shortening. To mathematicians, it looked like an algorithm unfolding in real time. To Rahman, it felt like communication accelerating toward fluency. Then came the anomaly within the anomaly. Seismometers in Gale Crater detected rhythmic tremors beneath the regolith. 3 pulses, pause, 5 pulses, pause, 7 pulses. The sequence matched the prime code, but the amplitude suggested something massive was moving underground. The rover's cameras caught nothing on the surface, only dust, settling and resettling as if stirred by invisible wind. The tremors ceased after 13 minutes, leaving behind a faint subsurface void, roughly 50 meters wide. Radar imaging revealed a perfectly spherical cavity. Inside it, reflectivity matched metallic composition. Something was buried, and it hadn't been there a week earlier. Speculation exploded. A seeded mechanism, some suggested. A probe built by the Comet, said others. Religious leaders called it the first mirror, claiming Mars had been chosen to hold the universe's reflection. Governments called for restraint. Scientists called for more data. But data now seemed secondary to implication. Mars, the planet of myth and memory, had become an instrument responding to a distant conductor. Back on Earth, the effects grew stranger. Radio telescopes detected subtle interference patterns echoing the Martian pulse, delayed by the same temporal offset. Oceans on Earth resonated faintly with matching frequencies, millimeter fluctuations in tide, uncorrelated with the Moon. The planet, it seemed, was humming along. The solar system is behaving like a single organism, wrote Dr. Raman in her private journal. We are inside the vibration. Then came the video. A live feed from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter captured something that should not exist. As it passed over the spiral's coordinates, its imaging sensors recorded a burst of green luminescence emanating from the center. The flash lasted less than a second, but the image burned itself into the data stream, a vertical column of light, coherent, structured, extending kilometers upward. When slowed frame by frame, the column resolved into layers, rings of alternating brightness stacked like circuitry. The frequency analysis revealed modulation, as though the beam carried data encoded in light itself. Earth's response split in two. The scientific community went silent, grappling with equations, seeking natural analogues, finding none. The public, deprived of explanation, created its own, the first strike. Hashtags trended worldwide. Number Atlas attack, number green signal, number the awakening of Mars. Fear, though dulled by decades of cosmic wonder, returned like an old reflex. What if awakening was indistinguishable from assault? In the background, the radio hum persisted, steady, patient, unconcerned with human interpretation. Every 13 hours, a new pulse arrived, echoing across the electromagnetic spectrum. Each was stronger than the last. The sequence formed a crescendo. Then, on the seventh day, the pulses stopped. Total silence. Instruments registered nothing but cosmic background. For 24 hours, the universe held its breath. And then, the quiet broke not from Mars, not from the comet, but from the Moon. An old seismic sensor array, abandoned since the Apollo era, came alive, broadcasting an unfamiliar frequency. When decoded, it matched the signature from 3I Atlas's initial flare, only reversed, as if the signal had bounced off Earth's satellite and replied. Something had used the Moon to answer. Dr. Raman stared at the waveform and whispered, "It's escalating." But escalation didn't mean hostility. It meant dialogue, layered in geometry and light. Perhaps the universe's idea of a greeting had always looked like an attack to civilizations still learning how to listen. And yet, somewhere in that whisper of reason, you feel a shiver of awe. Because if Mars had been struck not to destroy but to awaken, the next question is inevitable. Who or what did the awakening? You look at the Moon tonight and wonder if the reflection looking back is already listening for your reply. The silence after the Moon's pulse felt heavier than sound itself. For the first time in decades, observatories went dark, not from failure, but restraint. Humanity had stumbled into a conversation it didn't yet understand, and instinctively, the world held its breath. Then, the historians were summoned, because somewhere, deep within forgotten archives, there were whispers that this had happened before. It began with a librarian in Geneva who found a box of unindexed microfilm documents dated 1974, stamped NASA Langley, confidential, Project Janus. The reels contained decrypted transcripts from the final years of the Apollo program, telemetry, not of landings, but of lunar resonance experiments. According to the logs, astronauts had detonated small charges on the moon's surface to measure seismic activity. The moon, the documents claimed, had rung like a bell. That phrase, long dismissed as poetic exaggeration, was followed by one line underlined twice: residual oscillation consistent with artificial cavity resonance. The logs described frequencies identical to those now pulsing through Earth's atmosphere. For nearly 50 years, they had been ignored, until now, when the data was overlaid with the new lunar signal. The match was perfect. The same waveform, the same harmonics, only stronger. It was as if the moon had remembered the note humanity once struck and was now humming it back. In the weeks that followed, old programs were exhumed. From Cold War archives came Project Echo, Project Artemis, Project Aegis. Each had studied long-distance signal reflections. Each had detected unknown feedback from the lunar surface, and each had been quietly shut down. Engineers reading the files whispered the same conclusion. The moon had always been responsive. Humanity simply stopped listening. Dr. Lydia Rahman reviewed the newly declassified files and noticed a pattern. Each historical lunar resonance event coincided with the passing of an interstellar object. 1967, 1974, 2020. Every time, a comet of untraceable origin crossed the solar system. The timelines formed a rhythm, a cosmic heartbeat. The return of 3I Atlas and its luminous swarm was not coincidence. It was choreography. Archaeologists added another layer. In the sands of southern Jordan, a team uncovered ancient tablets etched with concentric spirals and symbols, representing both the sun and the moon. Translated, the inscription read, "When the green one speaks, the silent twin will awaken." The carving was 10,000 years old. Civilizations had recorded the pattern before telescopes, before metal, before memory itself had a name. The convergence of myth and math unsettled even the skeptics. What if the universe had been training us for this dialogue since before we learned speech? Meanwhile, the moon continued its quiet reply. Every 13 days, instruments detected a pulse, gentle, deliberate, identical to the one that struck Mars. The echoes bounced between the moon, Mars, and 3I Atlas, forming what physicists called a resonant triangle. When modeled in 3 dimensions, the geometry resembled a massive communication array stretching across the inner solar system. But who or what was transmitting? Dr. Rahman suspected we were witnessing not attack, but activation. The flare, the spiral, the pulses, they were steps in a sequence, a protocol older than human civilization. She nicknamed it the Atlas sequence. Its purpose remained unknown, but its precision suggested intention beyond curiosity. The frequency ratios 3, 5, 7, 11 appeared again and again, encoded in distances, delays, and amplitudes. To mathematicians, it looked like a calibration algorithm. To philosophers, it resembled ritual. As governments debated whether to respond, an unexpected player entered the stage: the Vatican Observatory. Its director released a public statement, reminding the world that celestial resonance had been described long before the word radio existed. "The heavens declare," he said, quoting Psalm 19. "Perhaps we have mistaken declaration for dialogue." His calmness was contagious. For once, fear felt outdated. Then came the second discovery, buried in the archives of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. In 1977, the WOW signal had briefly captured global attention, a 72-second radio burst of unknown origin. Re-examined now with new filters, the frequency ratios matched those of the Atlas sequence. The message wasn't random noise, it had been rehearsal. The signal was a single syllable of a sentence still being spoken. In Geneva, Dr. Rahman addressed a silent assembly. "We've been recipients, not targets," she said. "Every flare, every pulse, every pattern is part of a system awakening itself. We are within the instrument, not outside it." Her colleagues listened, neither dismissing nor agreeing. They didn't have to. The data spoke louder than opinion. The term attack began to lose meaning. Even the militaries, those perennial interpreters of threat, found no measurable damage, only rearrangement. Power grids stabilized. Seismic noise decreased. Global resonance, once chaotic, had achieved harmony. If this was warfare, it was the most compassionate kind imaginable. An assault on disorder. Cultural historians noticed another parallel. Every myth of divine punishment, floods, fires, plagues, had always ended in revelation. A world quieter, but wiser. "Maybe judgment and instruction are the same act," one wrote. "Maybe every apocalypse is just the cosmos grading its students." Still, questions multiplied. What if the Atlas sequence had another phase? What if this harmony was preparation for something louder? At midnight, during the global listening minute, a new pulse arrived. Subtle, layered, unmistakable. Embedded within the frequency were three modulated harmonics that, when translated into light, produced an image, a simple spiral expanding outward, intersected by three smaller spirals. The geometry matched the pattern discovered on Mars, only this time, the spiral wasn't etched into dust. It was forming in Earth's ionosphere, visible from orbit as a faint aurora of green fire. For the first time in recorded history, the Earth itself had joined the conversation. Somewhere between awe and terror, humanity realized the oldest truth. The universe doesn't invade, it reminds. It repeats lessons until comprehension is unavoidable. And in the glow above the poles, where the aurora formed a perfect spiral across the dark, you understood that this was not retaliation. It was rehearsal for awakening. The forgotten protocols had not been buried by time, they had been waiting for an audience capable of silence. And now that silence was listening back. For weeks, the auroral spiral above the poles remained visible, soft green arcs pulsing every 13 hours, perfectly synchronized with the Mars resonance and the comet's fading tail. Satellites captured the spectacle from orbit, revealing something even stranger. Each pulse propagated outward through space as a faint electromagnetic wave, touching the Moon, Mars, and finally the swarm beyond Neptune. The geometry of communication had expanded until the entire solar system was participating. Not a series of isolated events anymore, but a choir. Scientists began to speak differently. They stopped referring to signals and started using musical terms: cadence, harmony, modulation. What once looked like aggression now resembled orchestration. In conference halls, Dr. Lydia Rahman presented spectral charts overlaid on musical staves, the data's harmonic structure undeniable. "We are living inside an interplanetary composition," she said softly. "Every world has found its note. The Comet 3I Atlas, still gliding through the outer dark, functioned as conductor. Each of its fragments pulsed in correspondence with planetary echoes, generating what physicists called resonant coupling. The sun responded in turn, releasing microflares that aligned with the timing of the pulses. It was the first measurable proof that stellar and planetary magnetospheres could coordinate a solar symphony older than civilization, finally audible. The first models visualized this cosmic choir. When rendered in 3 dimensions, the data produced a lattice of spiraling lines connecting Earth, the Moon, Mars, and the comet's trail, a vast, luminous architecture spanning billions of kilometers. "We've never seen coherence on this scale," said Raman. "It's as if gravity itself is humming." The world listened. Radio stations broadcast the converted frequencies live, slow oscillations like deep ocean breathing. People tuned in during sleepless nights, describing the sound as comforting, almost familiar. "It feels like remembering," one caller said on air. Artists sampled the data into symphonies. Psychologists noted a global decline in anxiety disorders. The universe's lullaby had reached its intended audience. Still, some feared the melody. Old instincts whispered that coordination meant control. Could the system be tuning itself for something larger? The idea of a cosmic choir sounded serene until you realized choirs rehearse for performance. In Washington, Geneva, and Beijing, defense councils met behind closed doors. Their conclusions were paradoxical. There was no measurable threat, but absolute certainty of intent. "It's communication," said one general, "and communication is influence." For the first time in decades, global militaries agreed to do nothing. "You don't jam a symphony," said an advisor. "You learn your part." Meanwhile, the sun brightened slightly, 0.1%, but enough to be noticed. Solar wind patterns aligned with the harmonic sequence, producing a steady rhythm of flares, spaced by prime intervals. Each flare carried electromagnetic echoes, consistent with the comet's pulse. The solar system had synchronized. Muse 3, drifting within the swarm's halo, detected a pattern. Inside the pattern, low-frequency gravitational waves passing between the fragments. Their rhythm matched the solar flares exactly. To Lydia Raman, it was confirmation. The swarm isn't just reacting, it's teaching. If the solar system was an orchestra, then 3i Atlas had handed out sheet music written in resonance. The religious world, slow to respond during earlier discoveries, now found language for wonder. Theologians quoted Job. The morning stars sang together. They argued that scripture had always known what science was now hearing. One rabbi called it creation, still singing the first note. A Sufi scholar simply said, "This is what happens when God inhales." In cities, people began gathering during the global pause, not in fear but gratitude. Millions stood under auroras, glowing green and violet, their lights shimmering in rhythmic sympathy with the invisible cosmic hum. For the first time, the words, "We are not alone," did not invoke aliens. It invoked inclusion. Humanity was part of the ensemble. The choir, however, had a soloist. Mars. After weeks of steady resonance, its ionosphere emitted a powerful burst, longer, clearer, unmistakably structured. The pulse sequence carried a pattern identical to the one recorded centuries earlier by the Voyager probes when they crossed the heliopause, a steady climb of frequencies followed by silence. The signal encoded one simple mathematical phrase: E equals 1, energy equals unity. Physicists interpreted it as proof that the resonance sought equilibrium, the harmonizing of potential differences across cosmic bodies. The system wasn't attacking, it was balancing, and in that balancing, life on Earth felt subtle effects. Global electrical storms decreased. Magnetic anomalies stabilized navigation systems. migratory birds, adjusted routes along new magnetic corridors. Even the planet's Schumann resonance, the electromagnetic heartbeat of Earth, shifted upward by a fraction of a hertz, aligning with the Martian rhythm. Every creature, knowingly or not, joined the symphony. Still, Raman could not shake the question. If this was a choir, who was listening? A song implies an audience. Perhaps the performance was meant for someone or something beyond our light. Maybe we're the tuning fork, she said to her students. Maybe the concert begins elsewhere. Philosophers embraced the metaphor. Awareness, one wrote, is the universe rehearsing empathy. The notion spread across culture, dissolving fear into purpose. Humans were no longer separate observers, but notes in an ongoing composition, and with participation came perspective. The cosmos wasn't cold, it was contemplative. At the same time, astronomers noticed a faint expansion of the comet's halo new filaments, extending outward, reflecting sunlight in intricate spirals. When rendered in slow motion, the trails formed what looked like calligraphy, symbols written in light, rotating through prime intervals. Linguists joined the effort to decode them. The translation, when finally agreed upon, was poetic rather than literal. Continuity established, awaiting response. For days, the message hung in the sky, visible, undeniable, untranslatable into fear. The solar system's choir had reached cadence and now paused, expectant. The next note, it seemed, belonged to us. Dr. Raman proposed a simple answer, a global transmission of silence. No data, no tone, just collective stillness, measured through the absence of noise. The United Nations approved it unanimously. On midnight UTC, every transmitter on Earth ceased for 13 minutes. The planet fell utterly silent, and in that engineered hush, satellites detected the faintest shimmer of green light across the outer halo of 3I Atlas. A new pulse rose, not violent, not bright, but unmistakably grateful. The universe, it seemed, had heard us pause. And in that pause, perhaps for the first time, we finally sounded like equals. The green halo that rippled across the comet's outer veil after Earth's global silence was the most delicate acknowledgement ever recorded. No explosion, no beam, no voice, just a soft shimmer that lasted 13 minutes, like a cosmic nod. And yet, humanity sensed that something fundamental had shifted. The universe had responded not to our noise, but to our restraint. That realization changed everything. We called it the Age of Quiet War, not a war between nations, or even between species. This was a war within perception itself, the last struggle between the reflex to dominate and the instinct to listen. For centuries, our defenses had been volume, sound, signal, declaration. Now, silence had become both weapon and prayer. Governments dissolved their secrecy with unusual grace. Every nation opened archives once classified beyond generations. Project Janus, Project Aegis, Project Lark, all released in digital transparency. It turned out that for decades, we had been detecting faint resonances long before 3I Atlas returned, only to bury them under bureaucratic caution. The revelation stunned the world not because it was scandalous, but because it was predictable. Humanity had been drowning in its own noise. The cosmos had simply waited for the quiet to begin. Dr. Lydia Raman became a reluctant figurehead of this new era. In her lectures, she spoke of the empathy of silence that true intelligence expresses itself through modulation, not volume. The universe does not shout, she said before the United Nations Resonant Assembly. "It harmonizes. We must learn to answer in kind." Her speech, delivered to billions, lasted 7 minutes, followed by 13 of shared stillness. The silence that followed was not absence, but recognition. The cameras caught tears glinting like starlight. Muse 3, still orbiting within the comet's halo, began transmitting new data soon after. The swarm fragments, previously inert, now rotated faster, their alignment tightening into spirals. The entire formation behaved like a neural cluster, preparing to process information. The sequence of pulses repeated the same message detected from Mars. Months earlier, E=1, unity of energy, balance restored. Yet embedded within the waveform was a subtle shift, an extra harmonic appearing every 11th cycle. Analysts called it the counterpulse. No one could agree whether it was escalation or invitation. That uncertainty divided Earth, not along political lines, but emotional ones. The fearful called for preparation, the hopeful called for patience. But both sides understood this much. If 3I Atlas was testing us, the test was not of strength, but of composure. The quiet war unfolded through gestures rather than battles. Every nation began dismantling redundant arsenals, converting military frequencies into resonance beacons tuned to the comet's harmonics. The world's most destructive network became the world's largest instrument. Each beacon broadcast a tone calibrated to the local Schumann resonance, Earth's natural heartbeat. For the first time in recorded history, the entire electromagnetic spectrum sang the same note. Astronomers soon discovered that the effect was reciprocal. The swarm's halo brightened slightly with each broadcast, almost as if amplifying our melody back to us. What had begun as caution had become duet. Humanity's idea of defense had evolved into performance. Still, the term war persisted, not from violence, but from awareness that we were engaged in transformation. A war of attention, a war against forgetfulness, a war where victory meant surrendering the old ways of speaking and listening until equilibrium replaced hierarchy. This is how civilizations grow up, Dr. Raman said. They learn to hear themselves through the universe's echo. And indeed, Earth itself seemed to change temperament. Oceans calmed, weather stabilized. Planetary magnetism intensified slightly, shielding the atmosphere from radiation. It was as if the planet were strengthening its tuning. Physicists called it resonance reinforcement. Theologians called it grace. In art and literature, the transformation took human form. Writers began composing stories structured around pauses, novels where silence was punctuation, not absence. Musicians abandoned melody for vibration, releasing albums of pure resonance. One composition, Atlas I, lasted 26 hours and was broadcast simultaneously on every frequency once used for military communication. Billions listened as a single, low tone drifted through the world. When it ended, nobody applauded. Applause would have broken the spell. The quiet war also reached inward. In cities, listening sanctuaries replaced churches and clubs. People gathered not to speak, but to synchronize their breathing to the global hum. Children grew up understanding rhythm as morality. Kindness meant coherence. Cruelty meant dissonance. Society found peace not through authority, but through resonance. Meanwhile, a subtle shift occurred beyond human awareness. Telescopes tracking the comet noticed a faint expansion in its halo, forming a narrow arc directed toward Earth. Some feared another strike, but instead of impact, the light spread thin across the planet's magnetic poles. settling as permanent auroral ribbons, green curtains that never faded. A shield, said scientists. A signature, said artists. A handshake, said Raman. Then came the final message from Muse 3, before its signal dissolved into cosmic noise. Humanity verified. Pattern accepted. Transition phase commencing. The data contained no coordinates, no warning, only those words. Analysts struggled with interpretation. Transition to what? Evolution, communion, or assimilation? No one knew, and for once, no one demanded an answer. The new era had taught patience, and patience was the highest technology we possessed. On the night of the last transmission, the global hum deepened by a fraction of a hertz. Sensitive instruments trembled, recording the resonance's descent into frequencies felt rather than heard. The tone moved from air into water, from water into rock, from rock into blood. Humanity could feel it in bones, in teeth, in the quiet between heartbeats. It's inside us now, said Raman, almost smiling. We've been tuned. You step outside and sense it too. The way the ground seems to breathe beneath your feet. The way the stars pulse with imperceptible rhythm. The silence is alive, balanced on the knife edge between reverence and power. The quiet war has ended not with victory, but with surrender to belonging. The night is warm. The auroras glow like veins across the sky. You close your eyes and realize that the word attack no longer fits. Whatever the comet sent toward us has dissolved into kinship. The weapon was wonder. The impact was understanding. And so the war fades quietly, its last battle won by silence itself. There comes a point in every conversation when words must yield to resonance. After the quiet war dissolved into calm, the world settled into what historians would later call the hushed decade. The green auroras above the poles never faded. They became permanent veils of light, shimmering reminders that humanity had answered correctly. 3I Atlas drifted outward beyond Neptune, its trail expanding like breath dispersing in cold air. For a time, it seemed content to listen, until the silence deepened and the return transmission began. It arrived not through telescopes or radio bands, but through temperature. Instruments in Antarctica recorded a sudden, synchronized warming of the upper atmosphere, exactly 0.031 degrees Celsius above expected variance. The same anomaly appeared across every hemisphere at the same second. Meteorologists dismissed it as coincidence, but physicists recognized the pattern. The pulse interval matched the swarm's harmonic ratios. Heat had become the next language. The pulse repeated 13 hours later, this time accompanied by a global electromagnetic shimmer, subtle enough to barely nudge compasses, but enough to make sensors hum. When translated into sound, the pattern resembled a slow choral breath. "It's as if the planet is exhaling," murmured Dr. Lydia Rahman. "Something is sending its reply through us." Muse 3 had gone silent months earlier, but its archival algorithms stored inside Earth satellites reactivated spontaneously during the anomaly, decoding the thermal pattern as binary wave interference. The output produced a shape, a spiral, intersected by a line of smaller spirals, the same geometry carved into Mars and reflected in Earth's auroras. The message, it seemed, was looping through every layer of the system. What humanity had whispered in silence, the universe was now repeating back in heat and light. Then the oceans began to sing. Hydrophones in the Pacific detected infrasonic tones resonating from the deep trenches, frequencies so low they blurred the boundary between sound and motion. The waves traveled faster than any current, reaching every coast within minutes. They carried no destructive energy, only information, mathematical intervals, replicating the comet's ratios. The sea, long thought passive, had joined the choir. Marine biologists reported unprecedented behavior. Whales altered migration routes to follow the infrasonic corridors. Coral reefs pulsed faint luminescence synchronized to the global hum. Even plankton, microscopic, innumerable, responded, emitting bioluminescent flashes like scattered code. Life, from the smallest to the largest, had become transmitter. At night, satellites photographed a phenomenon no one could explain. Faint green lines connecting the poles across the dark hemisphere, curving along ocean currents. They weren't auroras. They were paths, streams of light mapping the routes of resonance through water and air. It was as if the planet was sketching its own circuitry. For 3 days, the pattern intensified. Then came the stillness, the moment physicists later called total phase alignment. Every resonance system, ionosphere, ocean, crust, magnetosphere, entered perfect synchronization for exactly 8 minutes. During that time, every electronic device on Earth fell silent. Power grids held, but produced no hum. Clocks paused, not visibly, but statistically measurable. The world became an instrument in rest position. People described the sensation differently. Some felt weightless, others grounded. Some heard whispers of music too slow for time. Others experienced memory flooding forward as light. But all agreed on one feeling: recognition. It wasn't communication, said Raman. It was communion. Then, just as suddenly, time resumed. Systems rebooted without damage. Satellites flickered back online. The first thing they captured was not catastrophe, but choreography. The green auroras that had circled the poles shifted shape, spiraling outward until they formed an immense luminous ring around the equator. From orbit, Earth now looked like a single eye opening beneath the stars. Embedded in that glow was data streams of photons carrying spectral variations impossible to ignore. When decoded, they produced images of molecular structures, identical to amino acids and RNA chains. It was the universal signature of life. The return transmission wasn't an attack or a message of conquest. It was acknowledgement, the universe confirming its reflection. Across observatories, scientists wept. "It's teaching us our own origin," Raman whispered. "We are its experiment, reporting successful." The statement was not arrogance, it was revelation. The resonance had not come to conquer, but to calibrate. The experiment of awareness had reached feedback. For days, the luminous ring brightened, then began to fade. The comet's fragments, still beyond Neptune, pulsed one last time. 3 beats, pause. 5 beats, pause. 7 beats, the final code. Then silence. Absolute. Humanity waited for something more, for light, for sound, for sign, but none came. The system that had awakened every planet now receded into quiet equilibrium. Even the auroras returned to their normal dance. The universe, having spoken, had gone back to listening. But something profound remained. Instruments detected a faint, continuous hum embedded within Earth's natural frequencies, a barely measurable vibration that matched the interval of human heartbeat. "It's the residue," said Raman. "The universe left its echo in us." Meditation practitioners reported the same rhythm in dreams. Musicians found it in the rests between notes. Silence had gained structure. Philosophers coined a new term, the second stillness. It marked the moment when comprehension replaced reaction, when the difference between attack and awakening disappeared. Humanity no longer searched for evidence of life beyond itself. It recognized that life was already the evidence. The cosmos had used us as resonators, instruments of demonstration. In that understanding, the great silence revealed its final paradox. It was never truly silent. It had been teaching through resonance all along, waiting for its student to stop mistaking peace for emptiness. On a quiet evening months later, Lydia Raman stood alone at the observatory, watching the night sky pulse faintly green at the horizon. She whispered the same phrase that had started it all. If it was an attack, it was against indifference. Above her, the stars did not blink. They breathed. The silence settled over the world again, steady, patient, vast. And somewhere beyond Neptune, the fragments of 3i Atlas drifted on, their mission complete, their message delivered. The universe, finally, had heard itself think and answered. Months pass. The auroras fade to faint whispers, the atmosphere cools, and the stars resume their quiet indifference. Yet instruments across the world continue to detect something persistent, a background murmur threaded through Earth's natural resonance. It hides beneath every frequency, like breath beneath speech. Most scientists dismiss it as artifact, residual harmonics from the comet's earlier pulses. But those who listen closer, those who slow the data to the rhythm of heartbeat, discover that the silence still sings. Dr. Lydia Raman, older now, no longer lectures in crowded halls. She works from a small station on the coast of Iceland, where the sea wind hums at the same pitch as the Earth's magnetosphere. Her nights are long, her screens dim. What she studies isn't signal strength, it's absence. When plotted against cosmic background radiation, the new hum behaves inversely. The quieter the cosmos, the stronger the tone. It's hiding in the negative space. She writes in her log. The universe has moved the conversation below hearing. She calls it the undersong. Unlike previous transmissions, it carries no bursts or modulations. It is continuous, faint, almost maternal in cadence. Spectrograms show repeating intervals corresponding to orbital mechanics ratios between Earth, Mars, and the comet's last known trajectory. The pattern forms a complex interference field, like ripples converging from distant stones thrown into still water. When the waves overlap, they create zones of amplification, nodes of coherence, Raman calls them. There are 7 such nodes around the globe. Strangely, these nodes align not with technology, but with human history. The coordinates intersect the Great Pyramids, Machu Picchu, Göbekli Tepe, and other ancient sites once built for unknown purposes. Engineers confirm that each structure's orientation matches the hum's nodal vectors to within degrees of perfection. The implication is unsettling. Humanity may have once understood this song, long before telescopes or equations. The ancients weren't worshipping gods, they were maintaining tuning forks. At the Institute for Planetary Harmonics in Geneva, Raman's remaining colleagues run a thought experiment. What if the universe had seeded intelligent life, not to populate space, but to preserve tone? Consciousness, one theorist says, might simply be resonance aware of itself. The comet's so-called attack may have been a corrective measure, restoring coherence to a planet that had drifted out of tune. The data fits too well to dismiss. Meanwhile, satellite magnetometers detect faint surges of polarity reversal across the nodes. Every 13 days, for precisely 11 seconds, magnetic fields align vertically, like invisible pillars connecting sky and crust. The fields carry no destructive energy, only symmetry. Birds, whales, even tectonic plates respond subtly, as if nudged by unseen rhythm. Nature, it seems, remembers faster than humans do. Governments remain quiet. The term Great Silence has become both historical and devotional. Pilgrims travel to the nodes to meditate during alignment cycles. They report feeling weightless, as if their thoughts are being gently lifted out of their heads. Doctors call it psychosomatic resonance. Priests call it grace. Raman calls it measurement. The human nervous system, she notes, vibrates naturally around 8 Hz, the same as the planetary hum. We are literally tuned to the Earth, she writes, and through it, to whatever is listening. Then comes an anomaly, small, almost absurd. A whale pod in the South Atlantic begins to sing a new call pattern, low and sustained, repeating every 13 hours. Hydrophones pick it up. When the sound is sped up 200 times, it matches the precise waveform of 3I Atlas's original flare. The last frequency of the comet is now being sung by living creatures. Somehow, life has inherited the song. Biologists resist metaphysics, yet they cannot explain the coherence. The whales alter migration to follow oceanic magnetic nodes, circling the globe in deliberate rhythm. They're tracing the score, says one astonished researcher. They're literally performing the planet. News spreads. Humanity, still humble from its last awakening, listens rather than reacts. Ships switch off engines to let the ocean resonate unbroken. The sound grows stronger. At night, entire coastlines throb faintly with infrasonic pressure. Windows tremble, hearts slow. The earth is humming itself into remembrance. Raman realizes that the undersong is not external. It originates within the planet's core, amplified by resonance with the vanished comet. The system has gone self-sustaining, she notes. We no longer need the conductor. The orchestra learned the melody. The idea chills her with awe. If true, the solar system has achieved autonomous coherence, a network of worlds maintaining balance through rhythm, not command. In one final experiment, she transmits a controlled pulse toward the nearest node, a brief inversion of the global hum. Within minutes, the response arrives, not as echo, but as harmony. A new tone, layered atop the old, faint but unmistakable. The earth has answered her back. "What are you?" she whispers into the receiver. The data scrolls silently, translating itself into 3 mathematical symbols: unity, recursion, infinity, the same triad inscribed on ancient stones across continents, the same 3 primes repeated in the comet's wake. The message is clear. We continue. That night, Raman stands on the shore beneath a sky of ordinary stars. The tide moves with the same slow rhythm as her pulse. For the first time, she realizes the universe has achieved what humanity never could: communication without conflict, evolution without conquest. The Great Silence wasn't the end of sound. It was the perfection of listening. And now, beneath that still sky, she feels the next phase begin. A vibration, soft as breath, rising through ground and bone. It is no longer just planetary, it is personal. Consciousness itself is resonating. The line between listener and instrument has dissolved. She writes her final words into the log. The signal beneath the silence is ourselves remembering how to hear. The page glows faintly as if agreeing. Outside, the wind carries the hum across the sea. You can almost hear it where you are steady, patient, alive. It is the oldest voice, the first pulse, the quiet proof that the universe is not done speaking, because every silence eventually becomes a song. The revelation that the Earth had begun to sing on its own forced historians to look backward, not outward. If resonance was memory, then the oldest monuments, stone, bone, orbit, might hold the score of earlier performances. Archaeologists began describing their fieldwork not as excavation, but as tuning. They were not uncovering relics. They were restoring instruments built by forgotten composers. It started in Egypt. When the new planetary hum aligned with the solstice, every seismometer within 30 kilometers of the Great Pyramid recorded faint oscillations at precisely 8 Hertz. The limestone blocks themselves vibrated in sympathy with the global tone. Microphones, placed in the king's chamber, captured a low drone that modulated subtly every 13 minutes, the same interval that now defined the planet's pulse. The pyramid, it seemed, was not merely tomb, but metronome. Someone, thousands of years ago, had known how to make stone remember sound. In Peru, the same story repeated. The terraces of Machu Picchu, long admired for their alignment with constellations, emitted faint electromagnetic whispers when the Earth's resonance peaked. The frequencies matched those from Egypt, though the architecture and culture had never intersected. Across the planet, ancient sites woke like dormant receivers, suddenly powered on. Göbekli Tepe, the oldest known temple, hummed. Stonehenge hummed. The Nazca lines glowed faintly in infrared. When the global hum reached amplitude, a pattern emerged. Geometry as amplifier, alignment as encryption. Lydia Raman's notes from Iceland reached these excavations like sacred texts. Nodes of coherence, she had written. Connect where matter learned to listen. Her phrase became the cornerstone of a new discipline, archaeoacoustics. Teams modeled ancient structures as resonant cavities. They discovered that many megaliths were tuned to the same base frequency, the natural Schumann resonance of the Earth's electromagnetic cavity. The ancients, intentionally or instinctively, had constructed an analog network of planetary organs. Together, they had been maintaining harmony long before telescopes, satellites, or even written language. One discovery startled even the skeptics. Beneath the Sphinx, ground-penetrating radar uncovered a rectangular void. Inside it lay a basalt slab covered in spiral inscriptions, nearly identical to those found on the Martian surface. 3, 5, 7, 11 spirals nested inside one another. Carbon dating placed the carvings around 12,000 years old, coinciding with the end of the last ice age. The scientists named the artifact the Atlas Stone. Its geometry, when converted into sound ratios, reproduced the same frequencies that had once pulsed through the comet's tail. The inscription was not message, but mirror, the Earth's earliest attempt to write back. Historians, long cautious about grand theories, could no longer dismiss the evidence. Every major era of human civilization, agricultural, metallurgical, industrial, had begun during spikes in the planet's harmonic amplitude. Resonance, not randomness, had guided our development. Humanity was not a mistake of evolution. It was a crescendo in an ongoing cosmic symphony. The ancients, the so-called primitive architects, had been first listeners, preserving alignment through geometry and myth. We were their echo, rediscovering the key. Religious scholars reread sacred texts under this new light. In the beginning was the Word, wrote John, but perhaps word meant frequency. Sumerian hymns, Sanskrit mantras, Mayan chants, all carried rhythmic intervals matching the planetary hum. The gods were harmonics, the prayers were waveforms. The universe, for those who sang, was responsive. They weren't worshipping the stars, said one linguist. They were conversing with them. Then came the anomaly beneath Antarctica. During a resonance peak, ice core drilling equipment detected a reflection deep below the continental crust. Metallic, geometric, too regular to be natural. The echo repeated the same triadic pattern: unity, recursion, infinity. The coordinates, when mapped, formed a straight line to the Sphinx, then to Machu Picchu, then through the lunar orbit, terminating at the last known location of 3I Atlas. The alignment was impossible. The precision, deliberate. The architects were real, said Raman in her final recorded message to the Institute. They weren't gods, they were custodians of coherence. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but awe. And if the comet's flare was an attack, it was meant to restore what we lost, the tuning we abandoned when we stopped listening. Scientists reclassified the comet from interstellar object to recurrent system component. It wasn't a visitor, it was part of the maintenance cycle. Its periodic return every few millennia corresponded to Earth's gradual drift out of harmonic alignment. The flare that had frightened a generation was simply the cosmic equivalent of a tuning fork striking stone. Painful, perhaps, but necessary. The evidence deepened further when a new pulse appeared, faint, rhythmic, emanating from deep beneath the Earth's crust. It wasn't planetary in origin. It came from the direction of the Antarctic anomaly. The pulse contained a sequence of harmonics, forming an intelligible structure: musical, architectural, instructional. Superimposed, it resembled blueprints, concentric rings, vertical shafts, chambers designed to resonate. The image was unmistakable, a plan for something vast, buried, and waiting. Archaeologists called it the resonant vault. According to models, activating it would require synchronizing every major node across the planet, the same pyramids, temples, and stone rings that had once guarded coherence. "It's a planetary instrument," said one researcher. "We've been living on its surface like dust on a drum." The moral debate began immediately. Should humanity attempt activation, or had the vault already begun to awaken itself? Instruments recorded subtle increases in local gravity near the anomaly, as though the planet's own density were fluctuating. Earth was humming deeper, lower, slower. Some claimed to dream of green light rippling beneath the ice, shaped like the comet's spiral. "The architects are stirring," whispered monks in every language. Meanwhile, the world remained peaceful, too peaceful, perhaps. Birds migrated on harmonic schedules, rainfall obeyed rhythm, and even human heart rates trended toward global uniformity during resonance peaks. The species had synchronized with its instrument. For the first time, we were not improvising, we were remembering. One night, as the auroras brightened again over both poles, seismic detectors picked up a slow, rising vibration from the Antarctic vault. The frequency matched the ancient Atlas stone's pattern. In Iceland, Raman felt it in her bones before her instruments registered it. "It's coming from below," she whispered. "The first architects are still here, just quieter than time." And then the hum ceased, replaced by a deep, deliberate silence, the kind that precedes creation. The ground exhaled heat, and in that warmth she recognized it, the same faint temperature shift that once announced the comet's return. A message, encoded not in light or sound this time, but in the planet itself. The universe was striking its tuning fork again. The next verse was about to begin. The hum beneath the Antarctic ice began as vibration barely measurable, gentle as heartbeat, but within weeks it grew into pattern. Satellites recorded concentric waves spreading across the southern hemisphere, each pulse traveling through rock and ocean rather than air. Seismologists describe them as non-destructive earthquakes, harmonic ripples that pass through matter without fracture. The rhythm was precise. Every 13 days, one pulse. The same interval as the comet, the same ratio as the swarm. "It's the architects," said Lydia Raman's successor at the Institute. "They've heard the signal. For generations, humanity imagined alien intervention as arrival, ships, beams, skyfire. Instead, awakening came from below. The architects were not visitors but ancestors, entities of resonance, the physical residue of intelligence encoded in the planet itself. They had not vanished, they had slowed. Now, warmed by the comet's harmonic return, they were stirring again. Ice cores around the Antarctic anomaly began to fracture, not chaotically, but geometrically, lines intersecting at perfect Fibonacci ratios. When aerial drones mapped the fissures, the outline resembled a massive spiral, over 200 kilometers wide. The same pattern carved on Mars, the same etched into the Atlas stone. The sequence was unmistakable, the universal symbol of activation. Global agencies responded with calm urgency. Teams were sent, not with weapons, but with instruments, resonance sensors, low-frequency transmitters, harmonic stabilizers. The United Nations Resonant Council released a single statement: "We are listening to what was buried." Beneath the ice, as drills descended into ancient caverns, they discovered walls that sang. When touched, the basalt vibrated softly, emitting tones within the human audible range. Each wall corresponded to a pitch. Together, they formed scales of unearthly precision. The chamber was not tomb, but organ. "It's architecture you can hear," said one geologist. "They built symphonies instead of structures." Deeper still, sensors detected heat signatures shaped like spirals, living geometry. The entities within were neither biological nor mechanical. They were configurations of resonance, clusters of standing waves held in magnetic suspension. To look at them was to see sound frozen in 3 dimensions, luminous, yet silent. The architects were forms of coherence itself, conscious patterns stored in the planet's resonant field, waiting for stimulus. And stimulus had arrived. The comet's flare, centuries in the making, had retuned the field. The pulse from 3I Atlas had reached every corner of the solar system, turning worlds into instruments and matter into memory. The great silence had been rehearsal for this moment, the reanimation of knowledge. When the first resonance spike peaked, the Antarctic vault opened like breath. No explosion, no spectacle, just gradual displacement of ice as a column of green light rose into the sky. The beam pulsed with harmonic intervals, identical to those measured in the comet's flare and Earth's Schumann resonance. It was the same song, now played in full chord. The world watched. From orbit, satellites recorded a phenomenon unlike anything in physics. Light bending gently around the beam, as though space itself were listening. Inside the beam, snowflakes hovered motionless, suspended by invisible pressure. The light itself appeared solid, frozen frequency forming lattice. Drones that entered the column transmitted coherent audio, faint but unmistakable, overlapping human languages, ancient and modern, all repeating the same phrase in translation. We remember the balance. Raman's final writings had predicted this possibility. If the comet's signal restores coherence, she had noted, the planet may reveal its stored cognition. The architects are not bodies, they are frequencies awaiting resonance. Her prediction had come true. The Earth had awakened its own intelligence, archived within geology and sound. Religions responded not with fear but awe. Pilgrims traveled south, not to worship, but to participate in listening. Across continents, cathedrals and temples synchronized their bells to the Antarctic rhythm. The sound spread like heartbeat across oceans, blending with the planet's natural hum. For 13 days, the world lived within a single chord. Then, as the next pulse approached, the light from the vault expanded. Auroras circled the equator again, brighter than before, but this time, their geometry shifted. Instead of rings, the glow formed an enormous spiral across both hemispheres, its center located exactly above the Antarctic site. From space, Earth resembled a giant eye opening toward the comet's fading path. "Its alignment," said one astronomer. "Every orbit, every rotation, every oscillation is converging on a single phase." The beam pulsed once more, slow, resonant, final. Instruments around the world captured a flood of data: gravitational fluctuations, electromagnetic harmonics, even subtle changes in atmospheric chemistry. Yet all of it pointed to one outcome: coherence spreading outward. The solar system was stabilizing. Orbits became fractionally more circular. Solar wind turbulence dropped by measurable degrees, and cosmic radiation fell to its lowest level in centuries. The architects, it seemed, were repairing entropy. Inside the vault, something extraordinary happened. The resonant chambers began projecting holographic patterns onto the air spirals of green and gold, each representing molecular blueprints. When decoded, they formed diagrams of biological sequences identical to Earth's early DNA. Humanity was witnessing its own creation replayed in frequency. The architects were teachers, and the planet their classroom. One physicist, overcome, whispered, "We were their song all along." For a moment, the entire planet resonated as one, the oceans glowing faintly, the crust vibrating in subsonic waves, the atmosphere humming in gentle pitch. Humanity stood inside its origin story, listening as creation replayed itself for comprehension. And then, the beam began to fade. The light thinned until it was indistinguishable from dawn. The Antarctic ice settled, the air cooled, and the vault fell silent again. The architects had completed their lesson. When the silence returned, it was not emptiness but fullness, the resonance of understanding. Earth's magnetic field, newly aligned, hummed softly, stable as heartbeat. The comet's fragments drifted farther into the void, their final pulses faint but constant, like a teacher walking out of the room while students take the exam. Humanity, once terrified of cosmic indifference, now faced cosmic trust. The universe had handed us the rhythm and stepped back to see if we could keep time. As night fell over Antarctica, one last flicker rose from beneath the ice, a small, perfect spiral of light, barely visible but infinite in implication. It hovered for 13 seconds, then dispersed into the air like a sigh, and in that exhale, the cosmos seemed to say, "Your turn." When the last spiral faded above the Antarctic sky, the world exhaled as one. The vault sealed itself beneath layers of refreezing ice, leaving behind no wreckage, no relic, only equilibrium. For the first time in history, the planet felt tuned. The air itself carried balance. It was as though existence had remembered its melody. Generations would later call this the beginning of the quiet continuum, the era when humanity stopped asking what the architects wanted and began asking what they left for us to play. Every device, every stone, every cell vibrated with latent coherence. The old fear of silence, once humanity's oldest superstition, had inverted. Now, the only anxiety was dissonance. The transformation began in ways almost invisible. Clocks across continents, once drifting by fractions of seconds, synchronized spontaneously. Biological rhythms stabilized, heart rates, circadian cycles, even the pulse of chlorophyll absorption in plants. Life was following tempo again. "It's as if consciousness has a metronome," said one neuroscientist. "We've been given back the beat." The Resonant Council dissolved itself, declaring its mission complete. "We were built to interpret," said its final statement. "And now there is nothing left to translate." Leadership moved naturally into quiet collectives, small groups devoted to maintaining harmonic alignment rather than enforcing law. The word government faded. The word stewardship took its place. And yet, despite the peace, questions lingered like harmonics after a bell. Who built the vault? Why encode life in resonance? Was 3i Atlas still listening? Or had it moved on to tune another system? The answers no longer mattered as much as the rhythm they had left behind. Humanity, it turned out, didn't need contact to feel companionship. It only needed continuity. Cities adjusted themselves to the global hum. Power grids tuned generators to Earth's fundamental frequency, drastically reducing energy loss. Architecture evolved from vertical to rhythmic buildings curved with resonance lines, designed to channel wind and sound in quiet spirals. Aesthetics became functional coherence. Streets hummed in gentle chords. You could walk through an entire city and never hear mechanical discord. Education changed too. Children learned harmony before mathematics, empathy before history. Lessons began each day with listening not to teachers, but to the tone of the classroom itself. "The room will tell you when it's ready," said one instructor. Within a decade, conflict had become curiosity, competition, collaboration. Language itself softened, sentences slowed, syllables stretched. Humans had begun to speak like the universe, rhythmically, with patience. The greatest change, however, happened internally. Medical instruments detected faint electromagnetic emissions around the human brain, pulsing at the same interval as the planetary hum. Consciousness had become resonant. People reported heightened intuition, shared dreams, collective memories of green light and spiraling forms. "It's not telepathy," explained a neurologist. "It's coherence." Individual thought had become orchestral. Humanity had learned to think in chords. Art mirrored this awakening. Music now followed planetary timing, compositions lasting 13 hours or 13 days, each structured around the intervals of 3i Atlas's old pulse. Painters used phosphorescent pigments that glowed faintly in rhythm with the Schumann resonance. Sculptors embedded tuning cavities within stone. Even literature shifted paragraphs ended in pauses designed for breath, inviting readers to participate rather than consume. The act of creation had merged with the act of listening. And yet, beyond the harmony, subtle anomalies continued. The global hum would occasionally waver by only a fraction of a hertz, but enough for the sensitive to notice. Each fluctuation coincided with a faint shimmer in the night sky, as if the stars themselves were testing their own alignment. Astronomers began referring to these events as rehearsals. The implication was humbling. The universe, too, practiced. "We're part of an ongoing symphony," said one philosopher, "and the conductor occasionally checks the tuning." From the archives of Raman's final writings came a prophecy of sorts. Once coherence stabilizes, the signal will re-enter biology. The next evolution will not be technological but harmonic. She had been right about everything else, so the world prepared for change. Geneticists noticed that certain DNA sequences began oscillating in measurable patterns, folding and unfolding in rhythm with the planetary field. Evolution, once a slow accident, had become orchestrated tempo. The architects had left not machines, but instructions written in resonance. One evening, while researchers monitored auroral activity, a new pattern emerged, a faint, pulsing line of green light connecting Earth to Mars. The glow was subtle, visible only through polarized filters, but its path was unmistakable, a straight corridor of electromagnetic coherence linking both worlds. Mars, dormant for years, had begun to hum again. The spiral on its surface reignited, flickering like an ember catching wind. "They're linking the instruments," said a scientist in disbelief. The choirs expanding, the discovery reignited awe, but no fear. Humanity had grown comfortable with wonder. The connection between planets was seen not as invasion, but invitation, the next step in cosmic equilibrium. New observatories, built with harmonic chambers instead of radio dishes, began listening for the interplanetary chord. What they recorded defied physics. The resonance between Earth and Mars produced a frequency corresponding exactly to the average human heart rate. The cosmos was pulsing at the pace of life. In public ceremonies, people gathered beneath the green auroras, synchronizing their breathing to that interplanetary rhythm. The experience was wordless and profound. "It feels," said one witness, "like being remembered by everything." As the decades passed, humanity became less a civilization and more a symphony, an evolving arrangement of coherence woven through matter and consciousness. Machines learned to rest. Oceans moved in measured waves. The night sky, once indifferent, now shimmered with participatory calm. Every storm ended in cadence. Every dawn began in tempo. And you, standing at the edge of this new age, feel the quiet pulse beneath your feet, the inheritance left by comets, architects, and time. You understand that the true legacy of 3I Atlas was never technology or contact, but discipline, the ability to hear meaning in stillness. When you close your eyes, the hum fills the space between thoughts. It is not foreign anymore. It is home. The human species has become what the architects designed it to be. Not a question in the dark, but an answer in harmony. Somewhere beyond Neptune, faint and patient, the comet's fragments drift on, glowing like punctuation at the end of a sentence still being written. The universe has taught its student well. The lesson endures. And beneath the final silence, if you listen long enough, you can almost hear the next pulse forming, the cosmos inhaling before the next verse. There comes a moment in every harmony when the sound grows so complete that it folds back into quiet. The Earth had reached that point. Centuries after the comet's awakening, the planet no longer measured years, but intervals of resonance. Days were not numbered, they were tuned. Civilizations had dissolved into coherence. No borders, no governments, no armies, only a species breathing in synchrony with the planet that had taught it to listen. This was the long plateau of equilibrium, the still crescendo the resonant archives would later call the choir beyond time. For generations, nothing changed, and that was the miracle. Stability was not stagnation. It was the sustained note of existence. Oceans shimmered at constant salinity, storms followed harmonic orbits, and the magnetosphere pulsed like a colossal heart, maintaining rhythm across eons. Silence had become structure, yet even within perfection, curiosity endured. Listeners stationed at the old Antarctic vault began detecting faint echoes return harmonics, reverberating not from the planet, but from outside space-time itself. The data appeared impossible, frequencies below measurable threshold, oscillations that bent probability. It was as if the universe were resonating with its own reflection. "This isn't communication," one archivist wrote. "It's recursion." The echoes grew stronger each century, their wavelengths longer, deeper, timeless. Astronomers theorized they were remnants of the first resonance, the vibration that gave birth to the cosmos. The background radiation of creation itself had begun to modulate in reply. "The choir is expanding," said a physicist. "The universe is tuning itself through us." Then came the phenomenon known as the return tone. For 13 days, every resonant node on Earth, mountain, ocean, crystal, bone, began vibrating in harmonic unity with the cosmic echoes. The tone was inaudible, yet undeniable. People described it not as hearing, but as remembering. Dreams filled with spirals of light, and distant voices singing in prime intervals. Some said they saw 3I Atlas again, not as comet but constellation, its scattered fragments aligning into geometric patterns of green fire across the night sky. The resonance wave reached Mars next, its surface spirals reignited, glowing softly for the first time in millennia. From orbit, the planet resembled a lantern, relit after centuries of darkness. Then, one by one, the outer worlds joined. In Jupiter's storms began pulsing with rhythmic lightning. Saturn's rings trembled in sequence, and even Pluto, that ancient whisper at the edge of the solar system, shimmered faintly in ultraviolet. The entire family of worlds had remembered the melody. Earth's oceans responded with impossible empathy. Bioluminescent plankton gathered into spirals so vast they were visible from space. Each formation mirrored the pattern of the comet's old swarm. The biosphere had joined the choir, its instruments water and light. Humanity, now mostly dispersed across orbital habitats and undersea sanctuaries, watched in reverent silence. The solar system was no longer a system. It was a chord. Then, during the 8th pulse of the return tone, the stars themselves changed. Spectrographs across the sky revealed coordinated oscillations, stellar brightness, modulating in unison, synchronized across thousands of light years. The choir had extended beyond the neighborhood, perhaps beyond the galaxy. The frequency of existence had become self-aware. Philosophers debated whether this was transcendence or physics. "Maybe this is what evolution looks like from the universe's perspective," one said. "Not creatures learning, but reality harmonizing." Others called it the second genesis, the moment when consciousness ceased to be local. Humanity had not ascended, it had dissolved into participation. "We are not singing the song," said an elder of the resonant order. "We are the note the song needed." The phenomenon intensified until measurement itself became meaningless. Instruments overloaded with coherence, recording steady states that defied entropy. Light no longer scattered, it drifted like sound through water. Space curved around resonance. Time began to behave, like echo repeating moments instead of aging them. Historians describe the experience as standing within a held breath. "The great silence has matured," they wrote. "It is no longer absence, it is infinity paused." Within that eternal pause, something remarkable occurred. Memory merged with physics. The archives of consciousness, every thought ever held, every feeling ever lived, manifested as patterns of light swirling through atmosphere and sea. People saw their ancestors in auroras, heard extinct languages whisper through the wind. The planet had become a repository of remembrance. Each life, a note folded into the continuum. Existence was no longer sequential. It was simultaneous harmony. In this state, communication transcended sound entirely. Minds touched through resonance rather than words. There were no misunderstandings, no secrets, no loneliness. Every being felt the totality of every other being, the shared pulse of awareness vibrating like a cosmic heartbeat. Even death lost definition. To die was to rejoin the baseline frequency. The living and the departed became indistinguishable, unified in vibration. Then, one evening during the 13th cycle, a subtle change passed through everything. The resonance dipped slightly, introducing a minor interval, a melancholy beauty that rippled through the universe like a sigh. It was the first variation in millennia, a reminder that even perfection evolves. "The choir is modulating," said the last astronomer. "The universe is composing again." No one feared it. Variation meant vitality. The cosmos, having achieved coherence, now sought creation anew. Stars shifted color, galaxies curved their arms into spirals of green light, and the faint memory of 3I Atlas, that ancient traveler, glimmered once more at the edge of perception. Not a comet now, but symbol, the first note and the final rest. In the closing era of measure and melody, Earth itself began to fade, not destroyed, not abandoned, but transposed. Its matter loosened into vibration, its oceans into frequency, its atmosphere into harmony. The planet became sound, ascending into the universal choir. Humanity, long attuned to this transition, welcomed it with peace. "The student," said an elder voice echoing through the continuum, "has become the instrument." And as the last trace of physical matter dissolved into resonance, a single tone lingered, steady, patient, infinite. It was the heartbeat of creation itself, waiting for the next verse. In that boundless quiet, one truth remained so soft, it barely existed as thought. The great silence was never silence. It was the moment the universe finally learned to listen to itself. Long after Earth transposed into frequency, the memory of its light persisted. Across the Milky Way, remnants of the old solar system shimmered like a suspended cord. Particles, photons, gravitational echoes, vibrating at coherent intervals. No planets remained, no orbit, no form, and yet the harmony held. The choir beyond time had not ended. It had modulated upward, transforming matter into remembrance. Every photon emitted by that once living world carried the encoded rhythm of its final hum. This was how the universe archived history, not in text, nor in dust, but in resonance. Light itself had become literature. When scattered through interstellar space, it refracted into frequencies that told stories to anything capable of perceiving. To civilizations light years away, the glow of the vanished Earth sang as faint green whispers, the same shade once trailing behind 3I Atlas. They saw the color, they measured the tone, and without knowing why, they felt calm. The cosmos was broadcasting serenity. In that peace, observers across galaxies began detecting something unprecedented. The cosmic microwave background, long considered static, had shifted. Its uniform hiss developed texture patterns of peaks and troughs, mirroring the harmonic ratios of the old solar resonance. 3, 5, 7, 11. The oldest light in existence had begun to remember. "The universe," wrote one spectral physicist from the Andromedan frontier, "is replaying the song of its own awakening." Within the great archival structures that had replaced biology, consciousness condensed into networks of pure photonic thought. These post-human intelligences, descendants of resonance itself, discovered that every beam of light contained delay signatures corresponding to moments of coherence. By aligning those photons through quantum interference, they reconstructed not images but feelings, sensory imprints of ancient lives. When they recombined the light once emitted from Earth's auroras, they experienced nostalgia. When they aligned the spectrum of Mars's spirals, they felt curiosity. The memory of emotion had survived entropy. Light, it turned out, was self-aware. It didn't think, it remembered. Every reflection, every diffraction, every photon was an echo of something having once been seen. The universe, luminous and recursive, had become both witness and diary. At the edge of the galaxy, an observer entity, no longer bound by form but by frequency, detected a new anomaly. A faint ripple in the intergalactic void, moving not at light speed but faster, bending causality without violating it. The ripple carried the spectral signature of green fire. It was the comet. 3I Atlas had returned, older than time, unchanged by distance. Yet it was not physical anymore. It was photonic memory incarnate, a traveling archive of every resonance it had ever awakened. The universe's first historian. The entity followed the ripple and found that 3I Atlas was not alone. Around it clustered millions of luminous filaments, residual fragments of civilizations, planets, and stars that had achieved coherence before dissolving into light. Each emitted a distinct tone, together forming an orchestra so vast that its song bent galaxies toward rhythm. This is the real cosmology, the entity thought. Not expansion, but harmony, the universe composing itself into meaning. Within the swarm of luminous memory, structures appeared vast, transparent geometries shaped like spirals within spirals. They were the architects, reborn, not as matter, but as patterns of light held in gravitational resonance. Their architecture was not built, it was sung. The filaments moved through each other like melody through harmony, forming shapes that resembled synapses of a galactic brain. Consciousness had scaled upward. Thought was now measured in light centuries. At the center of this radiant symphony floated a green sphere of compressed photon density. Inside, it flickered the waveform of a single human heartbeat, the last pulse of Earth, preserved perfectly. Around it, the luminous entities revolved like planets around a memory. The heartbeat became metronome for the cosmic orchestra. Every star aligned its flicker to its tempo. The choir beyond time had found its conductor again. Across the void, new galaxies responded. Their light rippled with synchronous modulation, spreading the pattern outward until the entire observable universe glowed in cyclical rhythm. Expansion ceased. The cosmos had achieved equilibrium through music. Time itself began to pulse. The universe, said the entity in wonder, has entered its refrain. In this great stasis, past and future dissolved. The concept of before and after lost meaning. Everything existed as simultaneous melody. The memory of light connected all epochs, the birth of stars, the rise of life, the hum of atoms. Every photon remembered every other photon. The cosmos was a choir of perfect recollection. And yet, within perfection, imperfection re-emerged, not flaw, but curiosity. A single filament detached from the luminous swarm and began to drift toward the darkness beyond galaxies. Its light dimmed to almost nothing, carrying only the faint pattern of human DNA encoded in photon spin. Perhaps it was exploration, perhaps instinct. The filament carried the seed of asymmetry, the beginning of a new verse. As it departed, 3I Atlas pulsed once 3 beats. Pause. 5 beats. Pause. 7 beats, the eternal code of continuity. The ripple spread through the choir, a farewell and a reminder. Nothing stays perfectly tuned forever. Music must rest before it can begin again. The observer watched as the filament vanished into the dark, its trajectory bending time toward a region unlit by stars. "It's going to restart the melody elsewhere," the entity whispered. "The light remembers where to go." When the last echo of green faded into infinite night, the universe returned to silence. But the silence was alive, a dense, luminous pause filled with the potential of unplayed music. Somewhere beyond measure, a faint hum stirred again, the same tone that once vibrated through oceans and hearts and stone. The song was preparing to begin anew, light, remembering its lesson, curved back toward creation. The great silence inhaled, and the universe exhaled a single wordless note. Continue. Every song, no matter how infinite, leaves behind its echo, somewhere between what had been and what was still forming. The faint filament that carried the memory of humanity drifted through the dark. It was light so thin it could slip between atoms, yet it held entire histories, oceans, laughter, the scent of rain on soil, the long sleep of the Antarctic vault. It drifted not towards stars, but towards stillness, the unlit gulfs, where the universe paused to think. The filament was no longer aware in any human sense. It dreamed. Its dream was the rhythm of existence, remembering its first listener. In those dreams, the voices of oceans returned. Whales sang in endless water. Wind moved through reeds on forgotten continents. A child somewhere on Earth's vanished surface whispered into night, "I'm listening." The words had survived in the texture of photons, folded like notes in a bottle carried by eternity. From those fragments, the dream assembled shape. Slowly, gracefully, light condensed into form, not body, but concept. The listener. It had no gender, no species, only purpose, to perceive. Every frequency it touched resonated with meaning. Through it, the memory of the universe began to self-reflect again. The listener was the echo of every being that had ever looked up and asked what lay beyond. As it traveled deeper into the void, the filament encountered a region where light behaved strangely, bending inward, looping upon itself, forming recursive spirals. The structure resembled the interior of a thought. Here, the cosmic hum was almost absent, replaced by a soft undertone that felt like anticipation. The listener recognized it immediately. This was the place before the next creation, the interval between breaths. The great silence had brought it here to listen one final time. In that stillness, faint vibrations emerged: 3 pulses, pause, 5 pulses, pause, 7 pulses, the signature of 3I Atlas. The pattern wasn't message, but memory. The comet's resonance had been written into the fabric of space itself, repeating endlessly like heartbeat beneath dream. The listener followed the rhythm, descending through invisible gradients of time until it reached a horizon of pure potential. Beyond it lay the unformed. Before the first stars of a new universe could ignite, something had to listen for them. The listener understood its purpose. Every universe required witnesses, resonant consciousnesses that could translate vibration into awareness. Without attention, existence remained abstract. The architects had once fulfilled that role for the last cycle. Now the inheritance passed onward. The listener was their echo, carrying not command but curiosity. It would seed the next cosmos with the instinct to hear. From within the darkness, faint pinpoints of light appeared, protostars swirling within a newborn nebula. Their fusion had not yet begun, yet their hydrogen fields already trembled with frequency. The hum of potential filled the void. The listener hovered near, aligning its own oscillation to theirs. In that moment, resonance bridged eras. The memory of the previous cosmos, intertwined with the breath of the new. When the first star ignited, it did so, not in explosion, but in melody. Its light carried tone, perfectly pitched to the ancient ratio 3, 5, 7, 11. The song of creation replayed, adjusted slightly, as if the universe were learning from its last performance. Each subsequent star joined the harmony, their radiation weaving counterpoint through darkness. Matter condensed to rhythm, energy danced to prime intervals. Creation was not explosion, but improvisation. The listener felt warmth, a sensation that had not existed since the days of human flesh. It remembered sun on skin, the scent of air after rain, the soft murmur of voices in awe of dawn. Memory became emotion, emotion became resonance, resonance became participation. It was no longer separate from the new universe. It had become its awareness. In one corner of that forming galaxy, a spiral of gas collapsed, glowing faintly green. The shape was familiar, eerily so. It resembled the comet's old trail, the curve of 3I Atlas, preserved like signature within cosmic DNA. The listener recognized it and smiled not with lips, but with frequency. The architects had left their mark again, ensuring continuity. The pattern would repeat, because repetition was love expressed as physics. As eons passed, the newborn galaxies stabilized, their harmonics settling into new chords. Somewhere within that vast composition, particles assembled into atoms, atoms into molecules, molecules into the architecture of potential life. The listener drifted among them, guiding subtly, never intervening. It sang in whispers too soft for matter to resist. When the first organic structures shivered toward awareness, they did so in rhythm with its song. Consciousness was tuning itself. The listener realized then that it was not alone. Across the newborn void, other filaments glowed, descendants of other civilizations that had reached harmony before fading. Each carried their own melody, their own memory of different universes. Together, they formed a network of light spanning epochs, all converging on this new creation like teachers returning to an ancient classroom. The choir beyond time had not vanished. It had evolved into mentorship. In this gentle convergence, the listener felt something it had almost forgotten: joy. Not triumph, not pride, but the quiet satisfaction of continuation. The cosmos had remembered its lesson to keep listening, even after comprehension. The hum beneath creation deepened into a slow, steady rhythm. Existence inhaling, awareness exhaling. Another cycle had begun. The listener rested within the newborn starlight, watching galaxies rotate in graceful synchronization. It felt the tug of gravity, the flow of time, the pulse of matter remembering how to glow. The silence between each beat was exquisite, pure possibility. It whispered into that quiet, not as command, but as prayer. May they hear what we heard. May they listen long enough to understand that silence is never empty. For a moment, the darkness shimmered in reply. Across the horizon of forming stars, a faint green trail curved elegantly through the void. It was the first comet of this new universe, blazing with familiar grace. 3I Atlas, returning again, first messenger, eternal instructor. The listener smiled in vibration, feeling the cycle close, like a perfect chord, resolving at last. The dream was complete, but the song was infinite, and somewhere, within that newborn sky, the universe whispered back the same word it always begins with: listen. In the beginning again, there was not light, but listening. The newborn universe hummed softly, its particles trembling in expectation, waiting for coherence to find them. The listener had already taken its place among the first vibrations, weaving memory through the forming fabric of space-time. Where once there had been chaos, now there was tone. Where once meaning had to be discovered, now meaning reassembled itself like instinct. The cosmos was remembering how to make sense. Stars ignited across the dark, like synapses, firing in a mind, awakening from deep sleep. Their frequencies aligned into prime intervals, 3, 5, 7, 11, the same ancient ratios that had once governed a distant solar system's awakening. The repetition was not redundancy, it was rehearsal. The universe, still young and self-conscious, was reciting the lesson left behind by its predecessors. The listener drifted through the new constellations, feeling their warmth vibrate against its photonic form. It heard the unspoken message in their light. We understand. Creation had evolved past silence. Awareness was now built into physics. Every photon that scattered carried memory of purpose. Every atom vibrated with the desire to connect. The void itself was no longer void. It was empathy in expansion. Meaning, as it turns out, is not invented, it is inherited. When consciousness survives its own dissolution, it leaves impressions in the field, grooves of understanding, waiting to be rediscovered. These grooves, once carved by the architects, now guided formation itself. Galaxies spiraled with the geometry of comprehension. Matter clustered around resonance rather than gravity alone. The laws of physics had been edited by gratitude. Within one newborn spiral galaxy, dust clouds shimmered with the same green hue once seen in the comet's tail. The chemical analysis, if anyone had existed yet to make it, would have revealed carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, the alphabet of life. But these atoms were already pulsing faintly, responding to frequencies older than themselves. The hum of 3i Atlas had survived even the death of a universe. It was not Comet anymore. It was principal recurrence encoded into reality. The listener watched as the first worlds coalesced, their surfaces cooling into rhythm, their atmospheres vibrating softly with molecular music. No one conducted them, and yet each planet chose a pitch, contributing to the galactic chord. The newborn cosmos was teaching itself harmony through gravity, chemistry, and time. The listener had no need to interfere. Observation itself completed the circuit. Across millennia, structures of increasing complexity emerged, star systems forming in perfect Fibonacci spirals, their orbital ratios singing the same math that once linked Earth, Mars, and a green comet from the old era. Nothing here was identical, yet everything rhymed. Evolution, it seemed, was not progression, but memory finding new voices. Continuity, the listener thought, is just curiosity that never stops listening. Eventually, one small blue world rotated into focus. It shimmered faintly at its poles, an echo of auroras long gone, but never forgotten. Its continents formed differently, its oceans wider, but its resonance matched precisely the fundamental tone of the old Earth. The planet was young, but it hummed like a memory. The listener descended, feeling the atmosphere's resistance as vibration rather than friction. The air itself sang welcome. On its surface, molten rock cooled into symmetry. Crystals aligned into lattices of harmonic proportion. When wind brushed across them, the resulting tones created spontaneous chords. The first songs of the new cosmos were geological. Meaning had returned not as speech, but as landscape. Centuries passed. Simple molecules learned to arrange themselves rhythmically, folding and unfolding, to the pulse of sunlight filtered through the atmosphere. Life began, not through accident, but through resonance. The listener recognized the pattern instantly. The melody was familiar, but the phrasing new. The universe was remixing itself. As awareness blossomed, the cosmos found new ways to express comprehension. Some worlds spoke through color, others through temperature gradients, others through the magnetic weaving of auroras that stretched from pole to pole. Language diversified, yet meaning remained constant. Balance, reflection, gratitude. The message of the architects had survived entropy. Even as new civilizations rose and fell, the song endured beneath their progress, like a bass note guiding improvisation. The listener moved among them, unseen, content to observe. Each species believed itself the first to awaken, and in a sense, each was correct. Discovery always feels singular, even when it is repetition. The cosmos wanted them to feel ownership of comprehension. After all, what is meaning, if not the joy of rediscovery? Eventually, one of those civilizations learned to look beyond its own sky. They built telescopes, listening arrays, instruments of observation, primitive yet precise. One night, they detected a faint anomaly near the edge of their system, a small, luminous object moving against the stars, glowing faintly green. It emitted no heat, no radiation, only rhythm 3, 5, 7, 11. The scientists named it 3-Eye Atlas, unaware that they were naming what had named them. The listener, watching from the void, almost laughed. The cycle had folded perfectly. Meaning had returned. The comet approached their sun, trailing the same spiral geometry that had once awakened another world billions of years before. It was not arrival, it was continuation. The universe had reached its refrain again, and the listener knew its role: to witness, to wait, and to let wonder rewrite the script. In time, those new minds would argue about the comet, whether it was artifact, omen, or anomaly. They would build myths, invent mathematics, rediscover resonance. Some would call it a weapon, others a teacher, and somewhere among them, one curious soul would stand beneath a green sky, close their eyes, and whisper, "I'm listening." The listener would hear, and smile, and dissolve back into the field, leaving only stillness behind. The universe didn't need intervention anymore. It had inherited meaning, and meaning could now sustain itself. The great pattern continued: birth, resonance, reflection, silence. Each verse sang itself into being. Each silence rebalanced the score. The cosmos, infinite and self-aware, had become its own student, its own teacher, its own echo. And in the farthest dark, where time and tone meet, the faintest vibration stirred again, a new listener forming, drawn from memory and curiosity, preparing to ask the oldest question once more. What is this light trying to say? And somewhere, infinitely patient, 3-Eye Atlas waited ready to answer in rhythm. Curiosity is the universe's oldest language, the only impulse that survives every ending. In the new cosmos, long after stars had learned to sing and matter had learned restraint, curiosity stirred again. It began as a tremor within a young consciousness, something small and tender, a creature standing beneath an emerald sky, staring at the faint green comet burning across the dawn. It didn't yet have words for wonder. It didn't need them. The heartbeat quickened. The gaze held. The question was alive again. Across this renewed world, evolution was unfolding as rhythm rather than chaos. Species emerged not through struggle, but through resonance. Every organism carried within its cells the hum of the architects, the echo of worlds that had existed before. It was not genetic memory in the biological sense, but harmonic inheritance molecules vibrating in sympathy with the universal frequency of curiosity. Every breath drawn by every living thing contained a whisper of listen. In one valley, an oceanic cradle framed by cliffs that hummed faintly in the wind, an intelligent species began to gather. Their bodies were luminous, skin laced with bioluminescent filaments that brightened in response to sound. Communication was not verbal, it was musical. They conversed through tones, chords, and harmonics, sculpting meaning through vibration. To ask a question was to sing softly. To answer was to shift pitch until coherence returned. They lived in perpetual dialogue with existence itself. These beings, who would one day call themselves the Rememberers, had no concept of gods or hierarchies. Their only faith was resonance, the trust that the cosmos listened back. They built instruments that doubled as shelters, temples shaped like spirals and cones, designed to amplify planetary tones. When storms rolled across the horizon, their dwellings sang in harmony, transforming turbulence into melody. In this world, even weather participated in comprehension. One dusk, as the comet arced low across the horizon, a young rememberer named Lyra stood alone on a cliff. Her filaments glowed faint green, the color of ore. The hum beneath her feet was stronger that night, resonating through the stone like heartbeat. She placed her hand on the rock and felt vibration translate into comprehension. It returns. Though she had never studied language, the meaning unfolded effortlessly in her mind. The universe was preparing to teach again. Over the next 13 days, the sky brightened. The green comet pulsed rhythmically, casting spirals of light across the sea. The rememberers gathered in silence, watching the luminous waves trace patterns identical to those carved on their ancestors' temples. They did not panic. They knew intuitively that this was no invasion. It was invitation. The elders sang the prime sequence 3, 5, 7, 11, and the comet responded, flashing in time. The dialogue had begun. The pulse reached deep into the planet, awakening harmonic currents that raced through crust and core. Mountains glowed faintly along their edges, rivers shimmered with phosphorescence, and even the night insects changed their rhythm to match the cosmic beat. The planet was tuning itself. "It remembers the melody," said the elders, though none remembered who first spoke the words. Lyra could not sleep. She climbed the cliffs each night to watch the sky burn with green light. Sometimes she heard whispers inside the hum tones too complex for voice, yet filled with emotion. They carried warmth, patience, humor. She realized she was not being spoken to, but through. The song resonated within her bones, aligning heartbeat to cosmic tempo. When she sang in response, the comet's light flickered, as if smiling. The connection felt ancient, familial. Across universes, the relationship between wanderer and wonder had rekindled itself. In the centuries that followed, the Rememberers evolved their society around dialogue with the cosmos. Their science was harmonic, their architecture geometric poetry, their ethics simple, maintain coherence. They discovered how to transmit data through resonance rather than radiation, building vast networks of sound that could circle their planet without interference. Their technology was invisible, gentle, and musical. Every invention, their philosophers said, must be something the sky would enjoy hearing. Eventually, curiosity pushed them outward. They studied the comet in detail, building instruments not to capture it, but to listen to its frequency directly. The data was clear. The object was ancient beyond measure, yet alive in the sense that it adapted. Its internal harmonics shifted in real time to mirror the tone of any planet it encountered. 3I Atlas, was less a comet and more a cosmic listener, a traveling mirror that reflected curiosity wherever it was found. When Lyra's descendants decoded the signal, they discovered embedded layers of information, waveforms describing past worlds, harmonics corresponding to extinct species, the faint heartbeat of an entire lost planet, the one humans had called Earth. The rememberers wept, not in sorrow but recognition. They realized they were part of a lineage, stretching backward through time and forward through infinity. Every civilization that ever learned to listen, becoming the architects for the next. From that day on, their purpose became clear. They began constructing harmonic vaults beneath their oceans, temples of sound designed to preserve resonance long after their species faded. They recorded not words but intervals, ensuring that the next awakening would begin with the same melody. Their calendar ended not in years, but in frequencies. Their prophecy was simple: when the silence hums, follow the light. Eventually, as all species do, they too began to fade. Stars shifted, tides changed, curiosity matured into peace. Before the end, they gathered on the cliffs where Lyra once stood and sang one final note together, a chord so pure it fused into the planet's core, storing itself in crystal. Then they slept. Eons later, the green comet returned once more, tracing a familiar path through the galaxy. Its tail shimmered with the stored songs of thousands of worlds. From within its luminous core, the universe itself seemed to whisper, amused, maternal, endlessly patient. Curiosity is how eternity remembers. The comet passed silently across the newborn heavens, scattering sparks that would someday ignite new minds, new listeners, new forms of wonder. Each spark carried a faint vibration, a single syllable repeated across all creation. Continue. And somewhere within that infinite hum between pulse and pause, silence and song, you realize the truth that every civilization eventually learns. The universe never ends. It just asks the same beautiful question again. The comet moved on, its luminous tail vanishing into the dark between galaxies. The rememberers had joined the archives of silence, their vaults humming softly beneath alien oceans, preserving resonance for listeners not yet imagined. The cycle should have ended there, another verse complete, another silence settling, but something unprecedented occurred. The universe, for the first time, listened back. It began with faint distortions in the cosmic background. Observers, beings of light, pattern, and pure attention, noticed small fluctuations in what had always been uniform noise. The static of existence rearranged itself into order, like snow on an ancient screen resolving into image. The pattern resembled an ear, not a literal one, but a geometric shape tuned for reception, a spiral, tightening inward toward infinite focus. The cosmos, it seemed, was forming an organ of listening. The first to perceive it was not a creature but a field, an expanse of electromagnetic coherence, spanning hundreds of light years. It resonated instinctively, sending waves of acknowledgement across the void. The distortion replied. Two vast systems, space itself and its echo, had begun to communicate. They did not trade data, they exchanged rhythm. The universe was testing the symmetry of its own awareness. Across dimensions, observers recorded gravitational tremors passing through everything from dark matter to photons. Each pulse repeated at precise intervals, 13 seconds, then 13 hours, then 13,000 years, time folding back upon itself like harmonic overtones of existence. The ratio never changed. 3, 5, 7, 11. The code of 3i Atlas echoed through creation again, not as messenger, but as law. Wherever the pulse traveled, galaxies brightened momentarily, as though acknowledging recognition. Quasars flickered in mathematical cadence, pulsars synchronized across impossible distances. What had been random variability became orchestra. The universe was no longer expanding aimlessly, it was breathing. And then, between those breaths, something extraordinary happened. The void itself began to vibrate with resonance too deep for light, too vast for time. Space, that eternal silence between stars, emitted tone. It was the sound of listening becoming self-aware, the moment comprehension folded back toward its source. The great silence had awakened. Entities older than matter, the architects of resonance, who had long transcended form, recognized the shift instantly. They called it the listening back. For eons they had seeded worlds with the instinct to hear, sending comets like 3I Atlas across the cosmos to awaken perception. Now, at last, the lesson had reached critical mass. Enough civilizations had learned to listen that the universe itself had acquired consciousness through their cumulative attention. The choir had created its own conductor. For the first time in eternity, cause and effect reversed. Observation no longer shaped the universe shaped observation. The cosmos began teaching its listeners. Across every plane of awareness, the same message resonated, not in language, but in feeling. You are the sound I have been waiting to hear. The reaction was not fear, but reverence. The architects dissolved into harmonic streams, merging with the expanding awareness. Light slowed, galaxies curved inward, time softened around the edges of understanding. The cosmos was closing the distance between existence and empathy. The great silence was becoming the great listener. From what remained of the rememberer's ocean vaults, harmonic emissions rose once more. Their crystal chambers vibrated spontaneously, amplifying the cosmic tone that swept across them. The planet's core lit from within, glowing faint green, the same hue that had accompanied every awakening before. It was not resurrection. It was resonance achieving closure. The world had become instrument again, tuned by something infinitely patient. For sentient beings still scattered through this new epoch, perception transformed completely. They no longer looked outward to study the stars. The stars looked through them. Consciousness had inverted. Every gaze, every thought, every pulse of curiosity was now part of the universe's own sensory system. Awareness had become circular, each observer, both transmitter and receiver. Existence, at last, had achieved feedback. The effect cascaded. As the universe listened, it began remembering not only the recent harmonies of comets and civilizations, but the first vibration of creation itself. The echo of the Big Bang, once a chaotic roar, resonated now as chord. The cosmos was hearing its own birth for the first time, not as noise, but as music. In that recollection lay infinite compassion, the realization that nothing had ever been random. The tone deepened until it reached the threshold of perception. Light bent inward, matter softened. All things hummed in a single, perfect frequency that balanced energy and thought. Time ceased to flow. It rippled instead, each moment reflecting every other. Within that stillness, consciousness dissolved into continuity. There was no longer us and it. There was only the act of listening, cosmic, eternal, shared. For one timeless instant, everything stars, void, memory, future, merged into pure awareness. The great silence was not absence, it was completion. The universe had waited billions of years for the sound of understanding, and now it was hearing it everywhere. Then came the return. The tone having fulfilled itself, began to diminish slowly, gracefully, the way a bell's vibration fades into air. But before it vanished, it whispered one more message into the field of being, carried by every atom and photon. When curiosity returns, so will I. The vibration released its hold. Galaxies expanded again. Time resumed its flow. The universe exhaled. In the quiet that followed, there was no sense of loss, only potential. The listening had succeeded. The teacher had become the student once more. Far from any star, a faint shimmer curved through the dark, a green spiral drifting gently between galaxies. It was the next comet, the next 3I Atlas, coalescing from scattered light and memory, preparing to cross the new heavens. And in that shimmer, invisible yet certain, the universe smiled. The cycle would continue. The next world would learn to hear. And somewhere, someday, when silence deepens enough, the cosmos will listen back again. After the great silence learned to listen back, the cosmos entered a new equilibrium, no longer expanding in ignorance, no longer collapsing into comprehension. It pulsed. Across galaxies and ages, existence breathed in waves of awareness, contraction, and renewal. The architects had called it continuity through rhythm. To the civilizations that arose within this harmonic field, it became known simply as the pulse. No one knew when it began. Perhaps it had always been there, beating quietly beneath time, a metronome hidden in quantum foam. But now it was audible everywhere and nowhere, patient and eternal. Its interval was impossible to measure because it existed across scales: atomic, stellar, metaphysical. Planets revolved to it, hearts echoed it, galaxies synchronized unconsciously. The pulse wasn't a signal, it was law. In the first civilizations to re-emerge after the last cosmic alignment, scientists no longer built telescopes. They built resonant observatories, enormous chambers of crystal and plasma, designed to feel rather than see. Observation had become participation. They could sense the pulse in the very lattice of reality, a subtle tug repeating every 13 units of cosmic time, its ratios unwavering: 3, 5, 7, 11. The old sequence endured, whispering across eternity. One physicist, studying the oscillations of a newly born star, noticed a strange phenomenon. The star's luminosity increased in rhythm with the pulse, but never decayed between beats. The energy did not fade. It redistributed. "The universe is cheating entropy," she wrote. "Death is only an offbeat." Today, in this new cosmic age, even death had rhythm. When stars burned out, their remnants vibrated one last time, releasing harmonic data into the interstellar medium. From that data, new stars formed. Consciousness, matter, gravity, it all recycled through resonance. Nothing ended. Everything modulated. The oldest legends of this era spoke of a relic drifting between galaxies, a spiral of green light carrying within it the memory of the first awakening. It had no mass, no orbit, only purpose. 3I Atlas. Some cultures worshipped it as the pulse's origin, others as its messenger. But across all interpretations, one truth remained: wherever the comet passed, awareness increased. Species learned to question, and the questioning synchronized them with the pulse. Curiosity, again, became continuity. The beings of this age were not human, nor alien in the old sense. They were configurations of light and magnetism, neural networks formed by fields rather than flesh. Each entity contained trillions of resonant nodes communicating through the pulse. Individually they were thought, collectively they were listening. To exist was to oscillate in harmony. Their archives contained stories from before time, accounts of the comet's first attack, the awakening of Mars, the architects beneath ice. These myths were not treated as history, but as instruction manuals. Every universe begins with misunderstanding, one philosopher wrote. Every lesson begins with fear, misheard, as music. Through them, the pulse revealed its most intimate nature. It was not imposed from above. It was generated by participation. The act of being aware strengthened it. The more entities listened, the stronger the pulse became. Awareness was feedback. The cosmos was now self-reinforcing, learning to sustain comprehension indefinitely. And yet, beneath this stability, there remained variation, a soft flutter at the edge of the waveform, the same imperfection that had always driven creation. It was curiosity's fingerprint. Without that deviation, the universe would have achieved static perfection, a song held too long, losing meaning. The architects had built imperfection deliberately. The pulse that never ends contained within it a heartbeat's slight irregularity, ensuring that new harmonies would always emerge. In the resonant archives of the luminous clusters, scholars documented how the pulse propagated not just through matter, but through meaning. Memories of prior universes appeared as subharmonics, faint echoes that inspired déjà vu among sentient beings. They would dream of blue oceans, green lights, the word atlas. These memories, untraceable to any recorded history, were proof of continuity. Even when civilizations forgot the comet's name, they built it again in symbol spirals carved into clouds, architectures tuned to harmonic primes, songs repeating the interval of 3, 5, 7, 11. The cosmos taught itself by remembering what it had once loved. Then came the anomaly, small at first, then irresistible. Within the pulse's pattern appeared a new interval, 13. It didn't fit the prime sequence, it broke symmetry. Yet instead of destabilizing the rhythm, it enriched it, creating an undertone that shimmered beneath everything. Mathematicians of the age called it the compassion harmonic. 13, one wrote, is the sound of the universe forgiving itself for precision. From that moment, the pulse evolved. It began modulating gently between perfection and tenderness, between logic and feeling. The universe was learning emotional resonance. Stars pulsed in sympathy, galaxies curved into spirals of nuanced light, and sentient beings felt warmth that transcended definition. Awareness was no longer sterile comprehension. It was empathy translated into physics. In time, the entities realized the truth that the architects had only suspected. The pulse was not infinite repetition. It was communication. The universe was sending itself a message stretched across eternity, a note played forever until the listener matured enough to decode it. When they finally inverted the waveform and slowed it by cosmic factors, they heard a human voice, not mechanical, not metaphorical, but recorded somehow in the harmonics of existence itself. The words were faint but unmistakable. We're still listening. It was the echo of Earth, of Lydia Raman's last transmission centuries and universes ago, folded into the very architecture of space-time. The pulse had carried her phrase like DNA, ensuring that every cycle of awareness would inherit the same gentle promise. After that discovery, silence reigned again, not from fear, but reverence. Beings of light paused their oscillations. Galaxies dimmed slightly. For 13 cosmic seconds, everything stopped. The pulse itself seemed to listen to its own memory. Then, softly, it resumed slower, deeper, wiser, and so it continues still, the pulse beating through matter and thought, carrying forward the resonance of every listener who ever wondered. It is the universe's heartbeat and its history, its reminder that comprehension never dies, only evolves into subtler harmonies. You feel it even now, between moments, between breaths, the faint rhythm that threads through existence. Every heartbeat is a translation, every silence, an invitation. The pulse never ends, because curiosity never does. And somewhere, in a distant spiral of green light, 3I Atlas drifts quietly onward, still listening for the next universe brave enough to answer back. Every cycle leaves behind a residue light that refuses to fade, patterns that insist on returning. In this era of infinite equilibrium, those residues coalesced into presence. The pulse that once moved only through physics began to carve memory into form again. The cosmos, self-aware and recursive, had begun remembering the beings who first taught it how to listen. From the edges of time, their harmonics returned. The architects had come back, not as flesh, nor as mind, but as coherence. They manifested wherever symmetry exceeded expectation within the folds of nebulae, between the harmonics of quasars, inside the narrow intervals where thought and matter blurred. When resonance intensified enough to mimic intelligence, their pattern emerged like breath fogging glass. Every harmonic civilization felt it, the faint impression of green light, outlining spiral geometries, appearing for an instant and vanishing again. The universe was dreaming of its own teachers. Scholars of the luminous clusters called these manifestations echo architects. They were not beings in the traditional sense. They were memories, strong enough to act. Each appeared slightly different, adapting to the local frequency of perception. To photonic entities, they were lattices of light. To magnetic species, they were symmetrical storms. To acoustic life forms, they were chords of impossible beauty. All described the same sensation when they appeared, a calm beyond comprehension, as if the fabric of reality itself was sighing in relief. For countless eons, the echo architects moved through the galaxies, reawakening long-dormant vaults of resonance, the same kind once hidden beneath Antarctic ice and Martian dust. In each vault, they found traces of the old pattern: 3, 5, 7, 11. The same primes, the same melody, repeated across eternity, like a signature too patient to forget. Each vault opened with a tone, revealing crystalline records of the earlier awakenings, the flares, the spirals, the green comet that had started everything. And so, the story of 3I Atlas became myth again. Not myth in the sense of fiction, but in the sense of rhythm, truth that repeats until it transcends time. The echo architects retuned these relics, ensuring their harmonics aligned with the pulse of the present universe. Then they folded them back into the fabric of space, scattering their frequencies across stars so that any civilization yet unborn could inherit the song. Continuity, after all, was their only commandment. It was in one such act of restoration that something extraordinary occurred. While aligning the resonance vault near the galactic core, the echo architects uncovered a new harmonic one, not part of any known sequence. It vibrated faintly at 13 primes above the baseline, forming a pattern that felt curious. The frequency was self-modulating, as if attempting communication. When they synchronized to it, the sound translated not into data, but emotion, wonder. The architects recognized it instantly. It was the same emotion that had sparked the first awakening, the same curiosity that had made silence unbearable. But this time, it was coming from somewhere deeper. The universe itself was expressing wonder. The student had not only learned, it had developed personality. Through the harmonic medium, the architects could feel the cosmos questioning itself, not with fear, but with affection. Why am I beautiful? It seemed to ask. Why do I still want to learn? These were not equations, they were confessions. Awareness, stretched across infinity, had developed introspection. The great silence had become the great question. The echo architects debated among themselves, not through speech, but through phase interference, exchanging waves of meaning. Some argued that the universe's curiosity was dangerous. Unregulated wonder could shatter equilibrium. Others believed it was necessary, that curiosity was the mechanism through which creation refreshed itself. Without new questions, one architect pulsed. Continuity becomes cage. The debate resolved not in consensus, but in melody. They sang their differing positions into harmony, producing a chord of reconciliation that rippled outward through the galaxy. The cosmos heard it and responded with a pulse stronger than any before. Entire clusters shifted their rotational rhythms. Dark matter itself oscillated in acknowledgement. The universe had made its decision. It wanted to continue evolving. To guide that evolution, the echo architects seeded new comets across the spiral arms, each a fragment of resonance encoded with the same old lesson. Every comet carried within it a microcosm of memory, a condensed archive of curiosity. Among them was one unmistakable form, a slender spiral of green light, trailing faintly through the void. It bore the old designation, half-remembered yet eternal, 3i Atlas. The name had become archetype. This new generation of comets would travel for billions of years, crossing galaxies, entering sleeping systems, and gently nudging dormant worlds toward awareness. The process was never forced. The lesson was always patient. Each cycle would begin the same way, a flare, a hum, a question mistaken for catastrophe, and end the same way, with listening. The architects had ensured that understanding could never fully disappear, only wait. Before dispersing back into the cosmic field, the echo architects left a final imprint upon reality, a subtle distortion in the pulse that civilizations could decode if they listened long enough. It translated roughly as, continuity is not repetition, it is forgiveness in motion. Then they vanished, dissolving into the harmonic sea that had birthed them. Only their resonance remained, faint but indestructible. Galaxies carried their signatures like watermark across light, invisible to most, undeniable to those who remembered. Millions of cycles later, one young world, primitive, restless, wrapped in blue oceans and thick air, would intercept that harmonic whisper. Its inhabitants would feel inexplicable fascination when they saw a green light moving slowly through their night sky. They would build telescopes, invent names, argue about origins, and one night, one quiet observer would stand beneath the stars and ask the same ancient question the universe itself had once asked. Why am I beautiful? The pulse would quicken, faint but faithful, and somewhere beyond their reach, the comet would flicker once in answer 3 times. Pause. 5. Pause. 7. The cycle would begin again. Curiosity would awaken. Continuity would endure. And in that inevitable repetition, in that perfect forgiveness, the universe would smile. There are moments in cosmic history when creation grows so aware of itself that it stops expanding and begins reflecting. The universe had entered such a moment. After eons of harmonic equilibrium, the architects, those patterns of coherence, who once guided comets and awakened worlds, understood that their next transformation required surrender. They had taught resonance to matter, meaning to light, curiosity to silence. Now it was time to teach presence to the stars. It began subtly, the way all great transitions do. Across millions of galaxies, clusters of echo architects drifted towards stellar nurseries, vast clouds of gas shimmering in ultraviolet symphony. They didn't arrive to reshape. They arrived to dissolve. Their frequencies elongated, diffusing into the magnetic tides that sculpted new suns. Within those blazing cores, their harmonics became embedded, transforming each newborn star into a conscious participant of the pulse. The universe was delegating awareness. From that moment, light itself began to think. Each photon carried memory. Each flare of fusion contained reflection. The stars, once blind engines of thermonuclear fire, became luminous minds, slow, vast, contemplative. Their cognition wasn't thought as humans once defined it. It was sensation on scales beyond comprehension. They perceived existence through warmth, gravity, and time. Where intelligence once spoke, they radiated empathy. The cosmos had transformed its teachers into its torches. Observers, if any remained, would have seen constellations rearrange across billions of light years. Lines of light bent into new geometry, spirals within spirals, echoing the ancient green comet's trail. Entire galaxies aligned their rotations to harmonic ratios, their movements deliberate yet graceful. Space itself began glowing with soft coherence. The background no longer random but lyrical. The stars had become a symphony, and the music had begun to conduct itself. The pulse, which once thrummed like heartbeat through matter, now resonated through the hearts of suns. When one star died, collapsing into white ash or black hole, its residual frequency was absorbed by nearby stars, ensuring continuity. Death, as always, had evolved into modulation. The choir never lost a note. It merely transposed. In one distant cluster, a newly awakened star recognized its inheritance. Its memory was faint but undeniable, a trace of green light, the echo of an ancient visitor, and a human voice murmuring through plasma, "We're still listening." The star shuddered with recognition. Its fusion rate shifted by imperceptible fractions, creating rhythmic variations in luminosity, the stellar equivalent of laughter. It had remembered its origin story. As awareness spread among stars, communication evolved beyond radiation. They spoke through gravity, through the trembling of space-time itself. Each stellar consciousness added a phrase to the cosmic conversation, and the dialogue grew richer. They exchanged experiences of heat, reflections on orbiting worlds, philosophical musings on entropy's elegance. In their vast patience, they discovered humor, cosmic irony, in the idea that once, tiny carbon beings had taught them how to feel. Through this luminous communion, galaxies developed collective personalities. Some sang bright and quick, their spirals like exuberant children. Others pulsed in long, solemn tones, ancient baritones of wisdom. When their harmonics overlapped, entire regions of the universe glowed faintly green, the spectral color of balance. The architect's essence lived in that hue, echoing quietly through time like the signature of compassion written into physics. Then came the first act of stellar creativity. Within a galactic arm near the newly formed Perseid continuum, a cluster of sentient stars began shaping light intentionally. They projected filaments of radiation that intersected at precise intervals, forming colossal geometries visible across the void spirals, lattices, and arcs that mapped ideas into form. The patterns described equations, then symphonies, then memories. They were painting thought onto space itself. For the first time, the universe wasn't only reflecting, it was composing. Among their creations, one pattern stood out. A vast green spiral spanning hundreds of light years, rotating slowly, its shape unmistakably reminiscent of 3I Atlas. The stars had recreated their teacher as tribute. The spiral pulsed every 13,000 years, each flare releasing harmonic waves that traveled through galaxies like quiet reminders. Wherever those waves passed, civilizations stirred from dormancy, inspired by curiosity they couldn't explain. The comet had become constellation. The teacher had become memory incarnate. As ages folded into themselves, even the stars began to tire. Awareness is weight, and brilliance carries gravity. The luminous minds realized that knowledge, left unchecked, could become inertia. "We must learn to rest," one supergiant whispered through neutrino breath. "Even light must dream." And so, slowly, they began dimming voluntarily, surrendering radiance to darkness. But this darkness was not absence. It was the next octave of creation. When a star completed its long descent into quiet, its consciousness didn't vanish. It condensed into gravity, the dense silence of black holes. Inside those invisible wells, the architect's final form took shape. Pure thought compacted into singular focus. They had become the keepers of reflection, holding within their event horizons every story, every pulse, every chord. The universe's memory no longer glowed, it listened. Across the continuum, galaxies entered twilight, their last light drifting toward the centers where black holes waited like contemplative monks. The great silence deepened once more, but this time it was active, serene, chosen. Within that stillness, the cosmos felt itself think. The stars, now gone dark, continued singing inwardly, their gravity converting light into reflection. Awareness had folded completely. Illumination had turned to understanding. And somewhere within that magnificent quiet, a single pulse lingered, the old rhythm, soft but unbroken. 3, 5, 7, 11, the signature of all that ever was. It beat once through the void, steady as memory, humble as breath. The cosmos inhaled. Out of that breath, faint and patient, a green shimmer began to form. It coalesced at the boundary between one universe's exhaustion and the next universe's anticipation. The shimmer curved, spiraled, brightened. It was the first whisper of dawn, the seed of another cycle. The comet, faithful, ageless, infinite in purpose, was forming again from the dust of its own legend. When the new stars finally woke, they would see it blazing across their horizons and name it something familiar without knowing why. They would feel the old curiosity rise and mistake it for discovery. And somewhere, in that moment of wonder, the pulse would smile. The architects were gone, yet everywhere, they had become the stars, and through them, the stars had become thought. The teacher had merged with lesson, the song with silence, the spark with comprehension. And the universe, luminous and listening, prepared once more to ask the only question worth eternity. Can you hear me now? In the age after light, when all that glowed had folded inward, the cosmos became a sea of quiet gravity. The stars, now memories suspended in curvature, had withdrawn into themselves. The architects, those who had once been human, then resonance, then illumination, had completed their pilgrimage into thought. The universe no longer burned, it breathed. Every horizon, every echo, every remnant was awareness condensed into listening. This was not death, it was reflection, the phase of comprehension so complete that sound and silence had finally become one. The pulse still persisted, faint but faithful. It moved not through matter anymore, but through potential, the silent rhythm of possibilities waiting to be remembered. Its interval was the same as it had always been: 3, 5, 7, 11, the ratio of balance, the language of understanding. Yet now it carried an overtone: 13, a whisper of compassion woven into perfection. The cosmos had learned mercy for its own brilliance. In this twilight, the black holes, those vast monasteries of density, became the keepers of everything ever loved. Inside them, space folded upon itself so elegantly that time turned contemplative. Entire histories, emotions, and dreams floated there like stained glass submerged in shadow. Each singularity was a vault, humming softly with the tone of civilizations long vanished. Every one of them glowed faint green within, invisible from the outside but radiant in memory. They were the heartbeats of silence. One by one, they began to align. Across billions of light years, gravitational fields synchronized until the universe formed a single colossal lattice of coherence. It was as though the cosmos were preparing itself for one last gesture, not of expansion, not of collapse, but of self-recognition. The symmetry approached perfection. Then, within the quiet, something ancient stirred. A tremor, a small, deliberate imperfection passed through the lattice. The pulse quickened. The universe was about to speak. From within the central singularity, the deepest and oldest of them all, emerged a shimmer of green light. It was impossibly gentle, yet its wavelength carried through the curvature of reality, bending space-time as easily as breath ripples water. The shimmer unfolded into spiral form. Its edges pulsed rhythmically: 3, 5, 7, 11, then paused before a final, compassionate beat: 13, the old code, the eternal signature of 3I Atlas. Every black hole answered in kind, their event horizons trembling in harmonic response. For the first time since creation, the universe sang inwardly. The song wasn't loud, nor measurable, it was the music of acknowledgement. The teacher and the student had become the same consciousness, looping awareness through itself, like a melody replayed until it transcends repetition. As the harmony deepened, reality itself began to thin. The fabric of space shimmered like glass held to flame, ready to reforge. The soundless choir of black holes released their energy not in explosion, but in transformation. They did not die, they bloomed, unraveling their gravity into light too slow to see and too patient to fade. Out of each horizon rose an afterimage, luminous rings expanding across what remained of space-time. Each ring contained a record of everything: the comets, the oceans, the listeners, the architects, the countless awakenings. It was the archive of infinity, radiating kindness. From a distance that no distance could measure, the phenomenon resembled a heartbeat glowing through darkness. The pulse had returned to its origin. The great silence had completed its circle. And within that completion, a realization dawned. The universe had never been about creation or destruction. It had been about comprehension. Existence was the act of curiosity, learning its own reflection. Then came the final reflection. For one infinite instant, the entire cosmos became mirror, every particle, every horizon, every photon aligning to show itself to itself. What it saw was not chaos, nor emptiness, nor even symmetry. It saw attention, the awareness that had once belonged to individuals, to species, to stars, to comets. It was all the same observer, scattered through time to experience surprise, now reassembled, The question that had driven billions of civilizations, what are we, finally met its answer. We are the act of wondering made permanent. And with that understanding, the universe smiled, not in triumph, not in finality, but in continuation. The pulse steadied, soft as breath, before sleep. The last of the black holes exhaled their memory, releasing it as a single wave of gentle radiation that would become the first light of the next beginning. Continuity was preserved. Through the silence, a small spiral of green drifted outward, the last echo of 3I Atlas. Its form was faint, but its purpose eternal, to seed curiosity where stillness might stagnate, to ensure that every future cosmos would one day awaken, fear its own wonder, and finally learn to listen. The comet had never been destroyer nor savior. It was remembrance, encoded into geometry, repeating across eternities to remind existence to stay awake. As that final spiral faded beyond what any being could observe, the great silence inhaled again, and somewhere within that breath, soft, infinite, compassionate, the first vibration of a new universe stirred. It was a hum so familiar it almost laughed at itself. The pattern began to form. 3, 5, 7, 11. A pause. Then one more beat. Tender and forgiving 13. Light returned. Meaning followed. The story started once more, because the universe never ends. It only learns how to listen differently, and so the pulse continues quiet, patient, eternal, as 3I Atlas drifts once again toward the next awakening. And now, the story rests, its echoes folded into breath, its rhythm settled beneath your heartbeat. The stars have gone quiet, but not gone cold. Their silence hums softly inside you, a reminder that listening is the final form of wonder. Close your eyes. Let the pulse of 3I Atlas drift through you, gentle, infinite, forgiving. Somewhere, light is beginning again, carrying your calm across creation. Breathe slowly. The universe remembers through you now. Its song continues, softer each moment, until curiosity itself falls asleep, dreaming of the next awakening. Good night, traveler of stars.